items. Looking for approval?
Move consent items.
Trustee Latham, Trustee Pauls. And we have a student delegation. I will turn it over to Superintendent Godden to introduce our
It
guests.
is my pleasure to welcome the students and parents of our Abbotsford Middle School. You're here to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a part of the MYP program. Mr. Kemp, welcome here. I'll turn it over to you now just to introduce our young people who are going to share some of their learning with us. So welcome.
So as Dr. Godden mentioned, my name is Graham Kemp, and I'm currently the proud teacher in charge at Abbotsford Middle School, Carrie Petzold, covering its centennial. Tonight it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to present alongside these 5 students. We have, hopefully in order, Zoe. Oh, Taya's out of order, but that's okay. Taya, Tasleen, Maxim, and Kiwi. It's all good. So Abbotsford Middle School is an international baccalaureate, a middle years program authorized school, also simply known as the MYP. This makes our school unique, not only in the district, but as of one of 24 middle schools in British Columbia alone. But it also connects us worldwide to schools, 5,175 schools around the world in 157 countries. This research-based inquiry model education has positioned Abbotsford Middle ahead of the new curriculum because for over 7 years, Abbotsford Middle teachers have focused on the process of learning, known in BC's curriculum as the curricular competencies, through its foundation in inquiry-based education using big ideas to drive the lesson focus, as well as using the 6 global contexts to act as a lens to guide and connect students and the lessons that they learn in the classroom to the wider world. The International Baccalaureate mission statement sums up our school's high expectations and goals, where the International Baccalaureate aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who help create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. In other words, we have a goal to create students with empathy, and more than that, compassion, which is empathy in action. As a culmination of this goal, our grade 8 students participate in a community project where they're encouraged to follow their passions to find ways to reach out to others. This concept is simple, but it's not easy. And it is based on the idea and philosophy of globalization, where students are asked to think globally and yet act locally. Here with me, again, are these 5 students to speak to their projects and how they are acting locally to affect larger change in the world. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you once again, I have to see their pictures up here. Here they come. Zoe, Taya, Tasleen, Maxim, and Kiwi.
For my project, I decided to help end period poverty. Period poverty is when girls don't have access to pads, tampons, and underwear. What got the ball rolling for my project was a conversation that I had with my mom when I was younger. I was wondering how girls in Africa deal with their periods if a lot of them don't even have access to clean water. My mom explained to me that it was actually a huge problem, even if lots of people don't know about it. I started thinking about what I was going to do for my project in May last year, as I looked forward to my grade 8 year. I thought a lot about it, and finally I remembered the conversation that I had with my mom when I was younger. I was first going to address period poverty in Africa, but after a bit of research, I discovered that this is a worldwide problem that includes Canada. I was really surprised at how many girls period poverty affects, causing 1 in 7 girls to miss school due to lack of period protection. I am doing a drive at my school to collect menstrual products. For every box you donate, you get 2 candy grams for your friends. I decided to do this because I thought it was a fun way to get people to donate and to learn about an uncomfortable subject. I chose to donate all the feminine hygiene products that I collect to the Cyrus Center, specifically because they help teenage girls in need of menstrual products, and I wanted to help girls my age. It made me realize how lots of people around the world have lots of different problems that you may not know about.
Oh, thank you.
I knew that the need for food was big, but I didn't realize how big until I watched a video that explained this all for me. My name is Taya Enns, and I'm doing my MIP project on Starfish Pack. In 2017, the Abbotsford School District told Dave Murray, the founder of Starfish, that an estimated 400 kids were in need of food throughout the district. Now, there are 46 schools in the Abbotsford district and over 18,000 kids at the time. I went to an elementary school that had 250 kids, and the amount of kids in need was around double my school. It doesn't seem like a lot, but the numbers were big. The need for food was and still is big. These numbers surprised me greatly, and I wanted to help. So I started packing backpacks at my church, South Abbotsford Church, a few weeks ago. I've also decided to put in candy and pencils into each of the packs to make the kids feel special and to get a nice surprise, but also to show them that someone does care. If kids can't get food over the weekends or through the week, how are they to expect things like gifts or treats? Most kids who are in need of food get food from the schools throughout the days, but throughout the weekends they don't get food. This is where Starfish comes in. Starfish provides food for kids who may not have any food over the weekend. These packs are a great example of how they affect the community. My project affects the community in a great amount because it touches kids my age, older, or younger. Starting working with Starfish, I've realized how many kids around me may come to school looking fine but are in great need of food. This project has also made me find this joy that I smile with. So, how can you affect the community in a way that makes a change? It doesn't have to be something big or crazy. It just has to be something that you know is making a difference.
Wow, thank you.
I chose to do my project on helping women in need. The organization I'm helping is Sarah for Women. Sarah stands for Support, Acceptance, Resources, and Action. They assist women in poverty with housing and living needs. This organization really spoke to me because I strongly believe in women's rights. Malala has been an inspiration to me from when I was in the 4th grade, so when it came time to pick a topic, I knew I wanted to help women in poverty. After researching, I decided to help Sarah for Women since I help so many women in my community. For this project to be successful, we need certain hygiene products to accomplish our goal. We soon realized that we needed to talk to managers at different stores. We learned to be resilient from the ongoing complications with the vendors. When we were collecting donations, there were many women who informed us that Sarah for Women helped them a lot through their issues. Overall, this experience taught my group resilience and positivity to achieve our goals.
Now that we've articulated the successes, let's discuss the challenges I've encountered while completing my service. Pursuing responses back from the public during the day is the most challenging part. This time is spent checking with our mentors and teachers to make sure we're on track with our timeline. This makes it difficult to connect with businesses that have similar hours to our school hours. When my contacts don't respond to my requests quickly, weeks slip by before I get my project up and running. Spare time is also very challenging to find. We only get one block a week to keep up with our timeline. Our timeline is exceedingly crucial. If we fall behind, we must use our time efficiently at home to catch up. Attaining publications about my service is also extremely difficult. When I try to spread the word about my service, I don't want to be like every other grade 8 student. I have to use my creativity to think of never done before ideas. Now that I've spent so much time on the community project, I must find time to balance both the community project and my classwork, in and out of class.
Hi, I'm Keely. I started thinking and planning for my MYP project in June 2019. We are encouraged to think about a community and where we saw a need for change. First, I need to figure out what a community meant to me. A good community is a place where you're accepted for who you are, no matter your race, what you identify as, or who you love. A few of my friends were more curious, known as bi-curious, about their sexualities or how they may identify. When they came out to me, they told me specifically not to tell anyone. This was because they thought of others would think differently in a negative way about them because they like both females and males. That broke my heart to hear that because that meant that people like my friend don't feel safe in my school. Since then, I wanted to do something that will make others like my friend feel more accepted in my school and know that it's okay to be who you are. That's when I came up with the idea for a mural. Not a public art outside of my school, but something small that would say to people who are out, hey, I'm accepted here. After talking to my friends, they pointed out how we have gender-neutral bathrooms in our school that I never noticed before. I thought that would be a good place to put it in because it's basically for people who are trans or something related. My hope is that this mural will make my peers feel more accepted and more safe about talking about the subject.
Thank you. Wow. Wow.
In conclusion, MIP is a great program to learn through and learn about. It gives kids a taste of the real world, a chance to reach out and discover, affecting the community through projects and learning through challenges and success. There's so many benefits of the program and things to learn. Thank you for listening and have a good evening.
So colleagues, I don't know how we follow up with that, but go ahead.
Well, first of all, my youngest son graduated from the IB program in Abbey Senior, and it was a really neat challenge for him. And I just appreciate the broad range of topics that you guys took on, and thank you so much. And I hope that your learning experience will carry you on into secondary and post-secondary adventures and stuff. So thank you so much for sharing with us, and I just wish you all the best as you continue on your educational path.
Trustee Pauls.
So I shouldn't be, but I am amazed at how you're able to tackle things that the generation of people around this table, we didn't talk about any of these things.
Yeah.
We hid from them. People giggled behind their hands about them. They made jokes about them, but nobody actually treated them like they were real things. And you guys are courageous and you're brave, and you've used an educational opportunity to actually make your community better and wiser and more informed. Because you know what? There's still people that don't talk about those things, that don't talk about feminine hygiene products, that are afraid to say the word period in public. Bi-curious is a word that people go, I don't even know what that means. It's new to some people. So you are kind of front runners in educating our community right now in the projects that you've taken on, and we're just so proud of you for your courage and for your integrity. So thank you.
Others, yeah. Trustee Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Peterson. Thank you for that presentation. It's really great to hear that you're reaching out into the community and doing this work. I have a complicated set of questions for you. You ready? Okay. Well, one of my first questions is you mentioned about you have an hour to work on this because it's part of your class project. Otherwise, you have to use your time efficiently when you're at home completing homework, as it was. From all of you or any of you, is this something that you would consider continuing on with in your own time, carrying it on as you grow and develop and mature? Like, where do you think this will take you?
Well, I think it really benefits, it doesn't only benefit me as going into my future into secondary, but I think it benefits our community as well, the people that are all around us, well, even in this room and outside of this room. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
No.
It's kind of, go ahead.
For mine, I'm doing a mural, and hopefully they don't take it down unless it gets damaged or something, but hopefully it'll make the school a better place when I leave still, and hopefully students that are LGBTQ+ will feel more safe in the school.
Anyone else?
Well, for me, when I'm packing the backpacks, I'm missing school, but I think that once I get out of school, if I could get back and doing that again, that would be something that I would like to continue just to keep spreading love throughout the world.
Yeah?
I think that
interesting because when I was in high school, I probably had a different experience than Trustee Paul's, but I was also in a very different part of the province. I was in the northeastern corner in a place called Dawson Creek. Where is that? And I probably was in school more than 35 years ago, but don't tell anyone. When I was in high school. Grade 8 was probably longer than that. But one of the projects that we did take on and talk about was periods, because we have it's a very high Indigenous population in the north, and it started out as a school project after school in our volunteer time, that we could actually create opportunities and share the things that were required to have a period, the hygiene and the pads and tampons, etc., some educational aspects. And I think that's actually one of the things that started me on where I actually worked in a career in charitable and nonprofit community. So it's projects like this that inspire us to do greater good when we're adults. So kudos to you. I'm very impressed. And I had another question, but I forgot it. So I'm not going to ask it. But thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I'm going to say thank you, Mr. Kemp, for coming along. Thank you for taking on your new positions.
Oh,
Please make sure you thank all the teachers that work with this wonderful group of students. Boy, we're in good shape in this world when we see people like you and standing in front of us. And thank you, proud parents, for being part of this. I know you were part of it, because that's just what parents do. So, yeah, you know, it feels good for us to hear this, that these good things are happening in our schools. So,
Well done.
really. All right, and with that, we will allow you to, yes. Trustee Wilson is the liaison, the trustee liaison to Abbotsford Middle, and we have a small gift to the students for coming out this evening and sharing with us.
I'll write your card, right? Okay, I'll write your card. Bring you some brownies. Brownies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Parents, you are dismissed.
Yeah. Thanks, folks.
Do you want your notes?
Oh, yeah. You can have them if you want. They're good material.
Sure.
Report on student achievement and results.
Okay.
Talking about education here directly, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent because we have a great report coming.
So one of the strategic plan pillars, of course, is to think about the tremendous amount of work that's going on in, I say broadly, in public education in terms of our redesigned curriculum and our effort to have more personalized learning opportunities for kids. One of the great challenges for us is to engage the public, engage parents, engage the community to build confidence in the work that we're doing, the kind of confidence that you see, you know, manifested by the kinds of activities that you just saw with the young people there, right? So it's part of the reason why the board had, as part of one of its strategic pillars, parent community engagement as one of the goals. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Taylor Stuckart, our manager for communications, to share some of the milestones we have just in terms of how we try to broadcast and celebrate the tremendous things that go on in the district as a way to build confidence in the work that we're doing. So,
Thank you, Evan. So I'm excited to be here tonight to kind of share some of the projects that we worked on last year in relation to communications. And there's always a lot of data on the slide, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. But I always like to start with a little bit of a snapshot to give you guys some context in terms of what district communications supports and provides training for. So these are our main platforms that we look at. So we have our web and our app, which hosts kind of our foundation of information. We use social media to share our message and amplify our voice. And then School Messenger is our platform that we use every single day, which is our top text phone. So we're one of the only school districts across the province that provides School Messenger for every single school in our district. And last year we launched an add-on feature to School Messenger, which is called Safe Arrival. So that's essentially our student attendance management system that allows parents to pre-excuse students for absences. And so we now know faster than ever before where our students are if they're not at class, because that is our responsibility. But knowing that we are a team of one for communications and most often a team of one for our schools at reception, the platform itself actually gave our support staff an hour back in their day every morning that they were spent, I know, it's really exciting, that they spent essentially phoning every single parent. And that's because the technology has an auto dialer feature, so it automatically phones 20 families at once as opposed to one call at a go. So that we launched last year, and now it's fully in our schools this year, and we've seen great progress with it. So in relation to progressive workforce, our objective is to improve our internal communications. And so last year we looked at a lot of internal projects in terms of kind of amplifying that. And so I really believe that when you have strong internal communications, you have a strong organization. And one thing for us was improving our brand guidelines. And so we built a full comprehensive communication website that is launching this year. We spent all of last year kind of building it. So a big thing for us is our visual identity, our logo. I'm very passionate about our name and not having it be a number, and I think that's well known for those of you that have worked with me for a while. But our communications website essentially took our outdated PDF that as soon as you printed it, it was old, and we built a full, robust, engaging platform of our communications website. And so it gives our staff and then also our suppliers a great platform for knowing how to use our logo properly and just kind of build up our brand. We also built a custom integrated training module for our staff. And this again is looking at the fact that it's difficult being one person, sometimes going out to all 50 of our sites. And so over the last 2 years, we collected common questions that we were repeatedly having from our folks and built a custom training module on the back end. So does anyone remember like Ask Jeeves? I kind of remember it, but you could essentially be like, how do you add a picture? How do you do this? That's what we've built on the back end of all of our websites for our staff, because they were having a lot of issues with like, how do you add a picture to a post? How do you get parents to go to X, Y, and Z? So we've collected all of that information and built a custom training module that basically took me and our web editors and populated us so that they are at their fingertips, which is really quite cool. One strategy within our internal communications that we look at that's kind of a measurement for if we're doing well is our Superintendents Newsletter or our internal staff newsletter. So we measure this with our open rate, and I am so excited by our stats from last year. We have over half of our folks opening our staff newsletter, and that is really something spectacular. Just to give frame of reference, when I started 3 years ago, we were at like 18%, and the industry average is only like 16% open rate for the education sector. So we're doing really well. You kind of always hear in the communication world that staff newsletters are dying or they are dead. But I think for us, our data is showing that they're still actually quite relevant. So it's a great way for us to share our same message to all of our sites because we are dispersed all across the city. And so engaging opportunities is the other pillar that I work under, and our objective with that is improving our external communications. So our measure for that is really looking at our website traffic and making sure that we want people to be online and engaged. So last year we are starting to see a little bit of a lull in terms of our web traffic, and that is something to be expected because we spent the last 2 to 3 years pushing everyone online. And now we know that they're online and they're staying online. We don't have a massive influx of new families coming into our district. So it makes sense that the numbers are kind of starting to slow down a little bit. And I always like to show our web and our app analytics just to give a frame of reference. I like to call this the heartbeat of communications. You know, good one, huh? So it looks at our web and our app analytics. Does anyone know the difference between the two charts that you see in front of you? Any wild guesses? So the top is our web, the bottom is our app, and the difference between the two is most people typically visit a website on a very habitual basis. So they log in first thing in the morning and then they log off. So that's where you see kind of the plateau. Our app has a push notification technology, so people are coming to our site based on when they see the notification on their lock screen or device. So it's really just quite fascinating. And then there's that massive spike shortly at the end of February. Can anyone take a guess?
Oh, gee.
I wonder what it might be.
They had a heart attack.
Well, yeah,
Snows,
sometimes
yeah.
I have a little heart palpitation when I see how many people are online. But that, of course, is our snow days that
Are
we
these the
had.
complaints for keeping the schools open or for not keeping, or the other way
Well,
around?
this was last year, so we did
Okay.
close a few of the days. So, yes. So it's really quite fascinating to see how our traffic essentially triples during kind of those high periods of wanting to know the information right away. So making sure we have safeguards in place so that the platforms don't go down, like unfortunately they did this year, is all really important. And then the lulls that you see kind of around January and April, that's just an indicator of winter break and spring break. So we know that folks usually aren't online, so it's a great opportunity for us to go in, and same with summer. It's a great opportunity for us to go in and do some edits to our pages and our platforms, so we know that people aren't online looking for information. So our target with that was to have 2.5 million page views, and last year we actually had over 4 million. So that's again another indicator that while our new users are slowing down, our page views are still maintaining at a high rate. And so a strategy as well within improving external communications rather is to improve our district website. So last year we looked at a lot of back-end updates, and one of the biggest ones was improving our emergency broadcasts. If you remember when we first started with our platforms, our emergency broadcast used to be just this huge big red block that would be put on the website for anything. If it was a shelter in place, if there was a water main pipe break, if there was a lockdown, and it would appear in this big red bold letters. And what we just saw was it was creating a lot of anxiety amongst our parents, because the reality is schools have notifications that pop up all the time and not everything is an emergency. So we created a new system where it shows, as you can see in that picture, it shows above our logo in more of like a stacked format, but we integrated multiple colors. So now we have a green banner, which is like happy-go-lucky, no worries, we have it all under control. There's just a little notice like report cards are coming out next week. It just gives higher profile.
Some it's red, for some
yes,
it's green, okay.
gives higher profile to something that's nice. Alerts are more for like if schools are closed, and we've reserved red to be just for lockdowns or evacuation, so that folks really understand the color differentiation as they're going through it. Another big update that we did last year was our Google Translate updates. So in collaborating with our ELL department, we recognized that there were a number of languages that weren't reflected on our website. So all of our websites could be translated using the Google Translate feature. It's not perfect, it never is, but it's a little bit of a step in the right direction for removing some of those language barriers for our families. So collaborating with the right departments kind of helped us make our platforms more robust. And so then another strategy is to increase our social media audience. If you know me, you know I love social media. I think it's a great tool for us in terms of sharing our student stories and what's happening within our schools. It is still to this day the fastest way for us to communicate messaging, whether it be urgent or celebratory. So we always take a pulse in terms of our social audience reach, and as you can see the last 2 years we've reached our target above and beyond, so that's really fantastic, and we know that folks are going there, and every month we're typically seeing more of our schools join the social league, so to say. So a lot of our elementary schools are kind of hopping on board and wanting to share what's happening in our Abbey schools. So another strategy is to develop materials that highlight our student achievements, and the Measuring Up report is one that I wanted to highlight. It's one of my favorite projects. It's also the board's report to the community. But last year we completely re-envisioned our communication strategy around the Measuring Up report. We took it from a marketing material that was just a brochure and a little bit of a video, and we created a whole integrated communication strategy where it was video, It was traditional advertising, traditional marketing. We directly connected all of the content to the board strategic plan pillars so that there was a clear line of sight towards what we were doing towards student success. And as a cherry on top, we won a national communications award for the Measuring Up report, which I was really excited about, and I was very thrilled to kind of bring back to our school district because it's the first comms award that we've had, but it just kind of goes to show that we are really doing something differently, and even a lot of my colleagues across the country were like, wow, that strategic plan of yours. So it was a very cool opportunity and one that I'm very thrilled to share with you guys. And then, of course, another strategy, lastly, improve board profile. So as you know, we are being live streamed right now. Very exciting. So last year we implemented our board meeting live stream, and that was to increase engagement for the average meetings that folks are attending. And so we know that our families across the district are often young families. It's very busy, so it's hard to get away and join here live in person. So we wanted to make the meetings more accessible. And so we've been doing it for about 6 months now, and I wanted to share with you some of the preliminary stats just to kind of see what you guys think. So on average, we're looking at about 160 views per meeting, which I remember when we launched, you guys kind of made a few jokes that, oh, are we gonna get 15? So I'm really thrilled with that. I will say it's not 160 views live every day, but what we're seeing is the week after the board meetings, folks are going on to our YouTube pages and tuning in. And so from that, we're seeing from our analytics that they're viewing about 25 minutes of every meeting. We know that they're not going to tune in for the whole thing, but what they are doing is looking for the information that is of value to them. So we have some opportunities, some room for growth for this year in terms of making more comprehensive engagement plans for our board live stream and how we can get it out wider and how we can recap it. But for like 6 months just coming in, I think this is pretty good data, and hopefully you're pleased with it as well. And so then I also love to show, it's my tradition every year, to show a video that we work on. So when Michelle Radomski was here giving her update for HR, she showed you a video that was with our operations and support staff that basically highlighted, it's what they're using for recruitment, highlighted what they love about the Abbotsford School District. What's been really exciting this year is trying to collaborate. Communications is collaborating with as many departments as possible. So we were able to cost share that project, and we also interviewed educators. And so we have a whole different side of folks sharing what they love about the Abbotsford School District. So to share this with you.
When I was growing up, I always used to say to my mom that I want a job where I go in every day and it's different. And this job is definitely an adventure every day.
Abbotsford actually was my opportunity to get into a middle school. So middle school is my favorite.
We work in an online environment, and I can have students that are from Abbotsford, students that are from far beyond.
Especially being a new employee in the school, I never felt like I had to prove myself. First day in that school, I was part of the team, part of the group. It was amazing.
I work with really great people, like really great adults, so I have friends and colleagues at work that I look forward to going and spending time with, but also learning from.
We always share information and collaborate, and the result of the collaboration is exceptional.
Team work with all the staff, EAs in the program I work in. Everyone has the common goal of student success.
The collaboration is powerful, and the fact that we are afforded autonomy as individuals to access that collaboration is very important. Having that space really speaks to how much they value us.
I come across situations where I do need the support, my principal, vice principal, all the teachers, everybody is there for you.
I think that the most attractive thing about Abbotsford School District is the opportunities. You're able to find kind of where you fit and hone your skills and develop into the teacher that you are meant to be.
We're often asked to try and support students, and maybe we come with a bit of a different lens, and we have some ideas about new ways to try that. And we've experienced, at least for me, an openness to try.
This is a safe workplace. I feel that Abbotsford is safe workplace where I can come to work and I can try things and innovate and make mistakes, you know, with the hope that, you know, we're gonna make things better.
I really enjoy the monthly Prodi days, and I have a variety of opportunities. I pick my own training I like.
There's resources for me to access for Pro-D, and there's I've been provided time to attend training and things like that I need to develop my practice as a counselor.
I love that small town vibe. I love that you kind of know everybody and it is a smaller community, but also because Abbotsford's so large, the diversity of the community as well. So you get that small town feel with the diversity of a big city.
Coming from nearer to Vancouver and Coquitlam, Abbotsford seemed like it was way out there. You know, once I got out here, the amenities are here. They've got great community programs, and it feels like a small community.
It's a beautiful community. It's not only the outdoors, we have the outdoors, we have the shopping, we have the beautiful community, we have a wonderful school district, so pretty much we have everything to be happy.
I went through a bit of a time of feeling a bit stuck and feeling unsure about where I was going in my career and not feeling the support that I feel right now. And so I'm happy to say that I feel it again. I feel kind of an excitement about my role and about the capacity in which I can do my work and where that might lead.
Outside of all of those things that you could negotiate and find, you can't negotiate being wanted and being valued.
I'm so satisfied with what I do and the people I work with.
Wow.
Like it?
Wow.
So that was a nice little video that we filmed last year highlighting our staff, and we'll share it kind of on our HR page and as we go out to recruitment fairs. But I thought it was really lovely to hear everyone speak so highly of our organization. And then so lastly, you can't talk about all the good stuff without addressing some of the challenges, and these are not necessarily new pieces for you guys or things that I've talked about before. We're looking at new ways to collaborate with all of our departments. That was a lot of my work last year, and I saw a lot of success from it, and just kind of understanding how things work. But our capacity to take on additional projects really is kind of at that pressure cooker point. So we've been really creative in terms of utilizing our consultants and technology to kind of limit some of that. But the hard part is when you do good creative work, more requests come in, so it's a double-edged sword. So we're building some portals right now to kind of help us manage those intake of requests and just kind of figure out our priorities as they relate to the strategic plan. And then training limitations for our communication platforms. We did build a really robust training module that's launching for staff this year for our websites. But something we've never looked at is social media training. And as we have more of our schools join social media, we want to make sure that they understand how to use it properly and effectively. But we're also collaborating with our IT department to make sure that security and privacy are also something that we're aware of, and how, what does social media look like for the district moving forward. And then of course, engagement with our ELL families. We've made a lot of progress kind of collaborating with our ELL department, and they've been really good at bringing, approaching me saying, Kayla, we really need to think about this and this being in a different language, helping it be equitable for all of our families. And so that is something that we really are looking at this year and making sure it's kind of a priority moving forward. And so that is communications in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer questions, comments, concerns.
Thank you for your presentation. Trustee Anderson.
We just have some comments when I started going through this on target, and I'm thinking, what are those targets? Till I read through the whole thing, and then all of a sudden they started popping up. So really now the only thing that I have, because I even had why the spike in February, and you went through that. And so parent and community engagement, you had a target of 5%.
For our web traffic.
And you went 19.4%.
Over, yeah. So that's looking at web traffic.
Yeah. Now kudos to you, because you really, it jumped so much higher than your 5%, and I thought that was tremendous to see
Yeah,
that.
and that's really also a huge kudos to our schools. We have spent so much time working with all of our schools to understand that our websites are really the foundation, the 24/7 hubs for our parents to find information. So a lot of it's mostly our school clerical that are doing all of the web editing, and they do a really amazing job of spending time to make sure the home pages are up to date with school information, but also fun stuff like celebrating what's happening in the schools and the money they raise and the events that they're doing. So it's a collaborative effort for sure.
Trustee Pauls?
So I have a question for you, but I have to tell you how awesome I think it is that the opener on your video, our opening teacher lady, and I forgot to write her name down, wore a Metallica t-shirt for her interview. That is freedom to feel accepted. And
I'll pass that along.
That's awesome. So my question is, remember just a couple of years ago when you embarked on this journey of trying to clean up all the websites and you started putting out the...
It's my first year.
Yeah, and you had this kind of website report card that you went through a couple times a year with all the schools, and everyone feared it and loathed it, and it was this thing, and I'm wondering how are you giving feedback about that now, and how are they feeling about it? Are they feeling more confident? Are they using the tools, and now everything has improved so much that nobody's afraid of this anymore?
So this year, this past fall, we submitted it. We are still doing web report cards, but I get the sense that this past fall might have been my last one, and that's simply because so many of our schools have actually reached near perfect on their web report cards. So
well done.
I know,
You did
so
it.
it's really fantastic. It's the whole purpose of doing a web report card was to make sure that our websites weren't full of outdated information. And so our folks really do get that now. What they're looking at more is how can they take school events and make them more high profile on their website. Like how do they get the communication to parents? So now it's training them how to communicate effectively as opposed to how to update a website every week. They get that. They're great. They're rock stars at that. So the web report cards are still valuable in the sense of making sure people take time to go through the website and do a web audit. It's something we're even doing in 2020. Web audits are it's like doing your taxes. It's not your favorite thing ever, but it's something that you gotta do and it's important. So they're still valuable, but they're gonna be tweaked moving forward definitely in terms of how they look because they've served their purpose, but they need to be refreshed.
How cool is it to start a project and have an end and be able to use that time for other stuff because you did it? That's just great.
It's pretty for sure.
Trustee Wilson?
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Kayla, I have some questions for you. One of them is around the, what's it called, strategy, and it's 8.1.9 for those who are following along.
Yeah.
Improve board profile role of board,
Yes.
and it says 100% complete. The goal was through June 2020, June 30th, and it says on target as of November 5th, 2018, which I will highlight was actually an election year, so it has nothing really to do with this board. So, because that was the election. So I'm just wondering what happened.
Could I see what it refers to on the report? That's possible.
The start of the strategic plan, isn't it?
8.1.9.
Improve board profile, role of board.
So that would have been something that was created, so all of the content that's in on strategy that pulls from this report was in relation to our 2016-2020 strategic plan. So it wasn't in relation necessarily to the board prior or the board that's now. It's just a general target of regardless of who is sitting at this table, we always want to work towards improving their profile. So I believe some of the strategies under that were things like adding board live stream meetings. I can't think specifically off the top of my head of what all those look at, but it's also the measuring up report. So making sure those pieces are highlighted in front and center would have been the strategies under that, and we completed both last year, which is why you get the 100% complete.
I would be curious to know what the actual strategies under that are. I'd like to see, just because I think, that was it is a new board, and And I still think that we still need to proceed with raising the profile. It's still one of the things that I think that we need to work on. Because we've had, conversations at the board table about increasing media releases and things like that, so that the board is always out in the news and people know what the board is actually doing.
Absolutely.
Well, we have the superintendent's blog, we don't have anything about the board other than, what.
You have
what
the
we-
measuring up report. I mean, the work of the
but
district.
that's not everything we do, right?
Absolutely, no. The work of the district is really the work of the board, so as much as we can profile everything that we're doing is of value, but strategic measures in terms of specifically what you folks are doing, this is a work in progress. It's never something that's, I say it's 100% complete. Improving the board profile is something that's always going to be on my plan in terms of communications moving forward, because it's a never-ending project. It should always be ongoing. So
Yeah, and I guess that's why I probably take exception to the 100% complete, because the measuring up report has started before and we're always improving it. I don't think
that would be in relation to the projects that were in it for 18-19. So
Yeah, that's what I'd want to point out, that is in reference to that project related to that objective. And so, yeah, that you took the words from me, so thank you.
I'm just requesting that as we move ahead, because it's set through June 30th, 2020, so it looks like it's been complete for a year and a half, and I'm like, So, just like to keep it on the radar. And I also have a question. You said about the web views, or the live streaming views, you had an average of 160, and I don't get that average, so I was just wondering if you could share how you reached the number.
Sure. So we pull all of our analytics based on all of the live streams that we've done since the spring of last year. And so Google Analytics gives us a report on the back end, something that the public doesn't have access to, just us as the host. And we create an average based on the number of views that we have for each video that's recorded on YouTube.
Because I'm just reading the views here that say like one's 35, 48, 195, 158, so.
Yeah, so some certainly have more than other, hence the average. It's approximate, but it's a work in progress. I mean, this is just for the first 6 months, so it gives us a little bit of a snapshot.
And I also have a question on the communications website and what the cost for that was.
In terms of
building it, you said you rebuilt it. It was in your first slide.
Oh yeah,
around
no.
Engaging the
So
the
in terms of
workforce.
our consultants that we utilize, that's Satropa Communications, who built our website from scratch, and they are on retainer for us in terms of supporting with communication projects. So this department website actually for the last 3 years, we've set aside a little bit of money, and that has gone towards it. So I don't have the exact figure. I'd have to go through and add it up, but that's built into our annual retainer that we had with them. So there was no additional cost to build it whatsoever.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Just a quick question about live stream. Now that we've done it for 6 months, it'd be good for us to think about what can we do with live stream besides just the actual board meeting. How I would like to see it be more interactive, but I don't know if that's possible.
Sure.
Because if people there have a question, I know the people in this room have a question. How do we field questions from those who are viewing from at home, because they can't all fit in here? So that's just, I want to think about if that's feasible to do and how to do it and et cetera.
We have
because we have 2
plans-
question periods, right? So.
Totally, and we have plans to build kind of an engagement strategy specifically for improving the live stream. So that will go forward to the comms committee with the board chair and vice chair, and of course to you guys as secondary for review. But those are all valid questions and things that we haven't necessarily talked about. I know in terms of how we currently have our live streaming structured, there's even a way for us to tag. We can add the agenda at the very beginning and tag agenda items, so that if someone's just curious and getting a budget update or a transportation update, they can click on that at the very first slide and take it to whatever part it is within the live stream. So it's just a better customer service feature. But in terms of like how we manage questions, that really depends, because the data is showing us that most people aren't on right now at this current moment in time. They're online for the next week. Looking at the information. So that's up to you if you feel like you want to collect questions for that long. There is an ability to have kind of a live question portal. It's just, do you want that to be something?
Something to discuss, okay, thank you.
Trustee Latham.
So, under challenges, you've got listed here capacity to take on additional projects, so if you could dream.
I could dream.
Nightmares.
Where would you go?
Well, I mean, we have I think our students are now over 20,000. So we are doing a lot with just one person kind of here in district. It's normal for other school districts of our size to have some type of administrative support. We've been pretty creative in terms of how we can utilize some folks that we have already here in-house and then utilizing some of our consultants. But if I could have a dream of a dream, it would be certainly to have a communications department that includes more than just one person. It's a bit of a running joke sometimes with the senior team, but it's fine. I have a thick skin about it. I'm kidding, but no, certainly having like a videographer, photographer in-house would be really quite sensational. And I don't have robust video editing skills, so we're really limited in that. But the number of stories that I get where I'm like, oh, I wish I could just go in and take a camera. I can't tell you how many times Kevin's come back from a school visit. He's like, you gotta get there right away with the camera. And I'm like, I can't. So to have that in-house would be something really would be my priority because it's 2020 and we know that visual content is what people are looking at online and on the website, and that's how we really tell our story.
So I might have a suggestion for it. We have these. We have students. They need projects. And they're in all kinds of different projects in their schools. We have the ADV. I mean, we got kids. We can say, hey, can you put a project around this and collect, here's some people I want you to interview, collect me some stories, make it.
We have a mic in my office, Corky, because I just had some conversations about that exact thing. We have grade 12 students. Yeah. We have grade 12 students that we're looking at maybe if they're interested. I mean, it's a win-win because for those that want to apply to university that need a portfolio or real-world experience, we would be giving them that. It's just a logistical thing that we're looking at actually this year.
Does UFV have any of those kinds of people that they could do their practicum here?
That's a great question, and it's something to look into. Good thought.
Instead of spending resources on a salary, let's give people an opportunity.
Totally.
Right?
Yep. And I mean, for some of them, we want there to be that higher level storytelling capability.
Sure.
But we certainly don't need it for every video. So that's something we're looking at.
Well, organic stuff is actually what moves people more than the polished. Do you understand? Like, I think that's what this generation and people are looking at is they want the real stuff. They don't want a polished Hollywood, you know, because they don't know what's been edited out and what's been. Totally. I think if they just give them the raw with all the mistakes is actually more effective than something that's polished. Anyways, that's what I think.
Fun social experiment to see from them.
That's just like we had the Metallica shirt on there. I mean, that, you know, Holly. If you want to make it polished, that person would be, right?
Totally.
Anyways.
Love it.
Thank you.
So not only is our measuring up report award-winning, Trustee Anderson and I were at a meeting where we got to share it with 4 other school districts, and they all wanted copies and might use it for a template for something that they're doing in the future around it.
We accept royalties.
And you made my day. You made my day at the video. You're right. Seeing things visually like that, those kind of, you know, I mean, it feels good. Throw some kids in there, and then
that's
it's 100%.
What I was just gonna say.
Yes,
Well,
but
this one was specific. This was for HR recruitment. So
But on our website, do we have students and everybody else? Yeah. Okay.
Corky.
Bye.
Have you not
Okay.
been
It's
there?
on our website.
Have you
haven't.
not
I'm
been
sorry.
there?
I haven't been there.
Okay,
I got enough to read.
so this is an action item in respect to the information given to us. We're asked to approve that we're making reasonable progress towards achieving desired results. So I heard Trustee Pauls, Trustee Rye.
Moved with the change of the word reasonable to outstanding.
Well, we won't change the wording of it.
Oh, that's my motion, then I'm withdrawing it if you're not.
Too late. All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, and we continue.
All right. So this is this is the final presentation in the student success pillar. We're gonna invite Assistant Superintendent Gina Bondi up here. As you know, it ranges throughout the strategic plan that we have goals related to our elementary schools, related to early learning, literacy, in our middle schools, deepening the kinds of inquiry, again, that you saw our middle school students share here. That continues into our secondary school and is manifested with some aspirations that we have for graduation and for, again, personalizing experiences for students at the secondary level. So it's with that I will welcome Assistant Superintendent Bondi, who kind of share some of the progress that we realized during the course of last year. Welcome.
Thank you, Superintendent Godden. Thank you, Chairperson Trustee, Chairperson Peterson. Before we start, I want to thank Kayla for setting such a high bar. I always want to follow lousy presentations. This is not but on a side note, the key to being a great director of communications is to raise awareness of brand, make people proud of being part of that brand. Kayla not only does that, but I'm going to say that when she's in the building, she makes all of us proud just to be here. She's a great colleague and a lot of fun to be with. So thank you, Kayla.
All right.
So let's start with the secondary schools progress report. Hopefully I'll see a bunch of check marks when I'm done. We'll see how it goes. We have two big pieces of lagging data that drives the operational plan. They are graduation rates and transition rates. That's really the two-digit things, the two-digit items that you're looking at. My secondary operation plan is proliferated with a whole bunch of 3- and 4-digit projects we're working on. I'm going to give you a couple of the key projects tonight, but I'm going to show you how they're making an impact in terms of our overall rates. So if you look at our 6-year completion rate, number one, we're at 91.3% last year, so it's our 4th year of increase. It's 4% higher than the provincial average. Our Indigenous students still remain consistent at 79.7. The average for the province is roughly about 10% lower than that. Our diverse learners have increased for the 3rd year in a row, and our children in care is a bit of an anomaly because that population, one, is small, and two, it changes constantly. And as well, so when you look at 6-year tracking, some of them become ours, some of them we lose. So it's a bit of an anomaly. There is still work to be done, and we continue to do that. When we look at our next piece of data, which is our transition rates, 95% of our students successfully transitioned last year from grade to grade. What I want to throw up, though, is our grade-to-grade transitions. This is for our Indigenous students. And if you look at the bottom 3 boxes, 96, 93, and 74, our average for all students in the district, grade 10 is 96, grade 11 is 95, and grade 12 is 86. So you can see that our Indigenous numbers are low. And I know that District Principal Darlene McDonald shared this data with you last week, but as she said, I would say it's not just the role of our Indigenous education team, but it requires intentional care of everyone in our system. And what we're working on this year, particularly in secondary school, is a positive attendance program with our Indigenous students. We're continuing to work on the project, I should say, and we're continuing to try to figure out how to engage all of our students, not just our Indigenous students. So the question of engagement and attendance really drives the purpose behind our secondary operational plan. I'll let you take a look at that in terms of our lens. So last year, our district partnered with Harvard and 11 other districts from across North America to form the Deeper Learning Lab. The group's goal is to build knowledge and practices that develop deep learning and foster whole system change. Now, it's a goal that aligns particularly well with our secondary operational plan to ensure that all students have educational experiences that develop their mastery, identity, and creativity. So our new curriculum provides us with a vehicle to pursue deeper learning while also allowing us to explore opportunities to restructure our secondary schools. Restructure them in ways that are going to encourage collaborative learning, not only between students, but also between adults, and flexible instructional delivery models. Now, the whole concept of collaboration is really a new principle in secondary. We like to think that we're going to start to make public the private act of teaching. and put the word public back into public teaching. And what that is creating safe zones for teachers to experiment, to take risks, and to feel comfortable sharing what they're doing with others around them. And Fred, you know what it's like. It's a whole new, it's a whole shift in dynamics. So in being part of the Learning Dozen, we took our secondary operational plan and framed it last year around 2 guiding questions. The first, at the core of the first question about driving deeper learning in your adult classroom, is a 2-fold understanding. Firstly, student learning and adult learning are symmetrical. That is, there is a parallelism between the work of adults in the system and the work in which we expect students to engage. We want our adults to work and learn the same way that our students work and learn. Secondly, while symmetry calls for transformative pedagogical shifts that should be led and owned by the teachers, they need leaders, particularly administrators, to forge a shared purpose, create space, and provide resources. I would argue that this is symmetrical to the work that you do as trustees. The same principles that you have as trustees are the same principles that guide this operational plan. The second one is, how does a new curriculum implementation facilitate deeper learning experiences for students? Now, if you look at the cycle on the bottom, what we did last year for the first time really was engage in what we call a launch and learn mentality. Brian Carpenter talked about it in that video that Kayla showed when he talked about taking risks and feeling secure in taking risks and making mistakes. That's all part of a launch and learn mentality. So the secondary schools have started to initiate deeper learning routines, not only in the classrooms, but within their organizational structures. They've changed their staff meetings. They've changed their department meetings. So that's no longer an information sharing session, but it's a collaborative working session where we're sharing our work together. So what we've got is changes in terms of learning experiences, but what we're still trying to work on is, how do we make this scalable? How does it move beyond just one school and into a whole system? So it's not just Rick Hansen that's transformed, but all of our schools have transformed. So I want to give you just a quick sense. I know Perry presented a month ago, just an idea of what this new curriculum is and how it links in perfectly with deep learning. So we've got 6 core competencies that you can see up there. Within these competencies, they're wrapped around 3 big rocks. The first one in our curriculum is the know principle. In deeper learning, it's called mastery. How do you master not just the content, but the competencies of critical thinking, communication, collaboration? The second one is creativity. Our whole new curriculum is based on inquiry-based learning, creating products that don't exist, taking content and moving it in new directions. But the biggest piece is the understand. And if you look at those 3 competencies in green, that's what we call below the green line. Those are social and emotional competencies. And we call it understanding. In deeper learning, we call it identity. We want you, if you're going to spend 35% of your waking hours engaged in a school activity, either sanctioned or non-sanctioned, you better be able, after 4 years, be able to tell us something about yourself, what you've learned, and what you're about. And not only tell us, but be comfortable with it. And so that's what deeper learning tries to do, and that's what we're trying to get across to all the classes that we instruct in terms of engaging kids in our schools. So, what have we done? We've increased our understanding and implementation of core competencies. Last year we completed year 2 of the new curriculum. Number 2, make learning standards visible. Walk into just about any classroom in any secondary school and you will see a learning target posted on the left-hand side of the board. There's consistency and there's continuity around practice. 3, increasing alternative assessment practices. We will never get rid of pen and paper. There's a place for pen and paper. My nightmare maybe, but there's a place for pen and paper. So we've put in alternative assessment practices. How can you demonstrate learning other than pen and paper? And 4, increase collaborative instruction. We've enhanced levels of engagement and sense of belonging for our Indigenous students, and we're still working on that. And I wish I could tell you what we're doing now, but you're gonna have to wait till next year. Next one is increase use of technology to support personalized and blended learning. How do we move AVS from a virtual school to a facilitator of blended opportunities in our schools? And we've started to do that already. There will always be a place for kids that want to do strictly online learning, but how can we use the power of technology to impact practices in the school? Now that we no longer have hours of instruction in terms of classroom instruction. We have a school day, but class time is no longer guided by X amount of minutes. So how can we be flexible with that to ensure learning and mastery that's not predicated on an 80-minute block? And the last one, enhance leadership and emergence through the development of communities of practice. So what's behind the goals? Really 3 big things. The first, structure in our schools. And if you look at that phrase, the two big pieces there are mental flexibility and emotional agility. And what we mean by that is, do our kids, or will our kids, have the mental flexibility to deal and create new things in an ever-changing world? The second one is emotional agility. With all of the social and emotional trauma that's coming their way, more than we've ever had to face when we were kids, are they going to have the emotional balance and agility to be able to move seamlessly through the experiences, through the emotional experiences they're going to have? So that means a real focus on social and emotional learning in schools. 2, creating an interconnected learning experience. Learning doesn't happen in isolation. Life doesn't work in isolation. You can't turn off the switch and say, yeah, I'm going to do something else now for 80 minutes and just focus on this. Nobody's myopically fixated on one thing. So how can we change that in schools? And the last one, lateral and organic capacity. Students, classrooms, schools, district departments need to be connected laterally, and best practices need to grow organically within each respective learning community. This secondary plan this year last year was very intentional in building lateral capacity with curriculum and with LSS. 2 departments that historically have been the domain of elementary schools and haven't been in secondaries. Now we're working together to move our agenda forward. So bearing all this in mind, I want to go through 3 key projects that happened last year above them all. The first is our peer-to-peer coaching pilot. Teachers co-plan and co-teach a course within their specific discipline and enter an inquiry cycle process wherein they provide feedback to each other around deeper learning, competency-based instructional practices. Step back for a second. What that means, 2 teachers in a room working together, sharing practices together, planning together. They also created 1 interdisciplinary deeper learning unit. So if you had an English and a science teacher together, at one time that semester, as a starting point, they had a 6-week interdisciplinary unit. 1 in each semester means 2. 3, they shared that with their staff. It's now accessible to everybody. So it's no longer my domain, it's our domain. And the end, believe it or not, each one ended with a professional capstone presentation in which the teachers presented to their colleagues what they learned, their experiences, how the process changed their practices. Again, adult learning replicating student learning. If we expect it of the students, how do we model it and live it ourselves? So we started with a group of 12 teachers, 3 schools. We've got 30 teachers this year, but the big question still remains, how do we move it from individual classrooms to scale? How do we create connections between teachers? And how do we become intentional about linking the good work in one school to another? And the answer, twofold answer, is 1, our communities of practices with our department heads. So in a partnership with the curriculum department, again, back to that lateral capacity, our department heads met as a group every second month. They continue to meet every second month to impact their curriculum. Each department is a community of practice that integrates deeper learning practices into the organization. And department heads serve as deeper learning facilitators for the teachers they lead. So for example, this year, every one of our schools, no department head anymore has a department meeting in their classroom. It's a rotating department head where they every month a different teacher in that department hosts and spends the first 15 minutes talking about a deeper learning experience they're going through in their class. Wow, they receive warm and cool feedback from the teachers. The reason they do that is because principals do the exact same thing in their department meetings. They don't have them in their office anymore. Each department head hosts one and goes through that same process. Again, replicating student learning. Now, within this structure, each school has an administrator that is connected to it. And this is probably one of the things I'm most excited about. Administrators from 7 secondary schools now form their own community of practice, getting their own elbows deep in the work of adaptive leadership. What I mean by that is 7 social studies department, 7 administrators oversee them. In the past, administrators would phone each other for triage purposes. How you doing with this? How you scheduling that? How you dealing with this student? What they're doing now in a community of practice, it's not about triage, it's not about solving problems, it's about knowledge construction. So what they're doing now once a month is meeting and talking about not the minutia of the curriculum delivery, but their adaptive leadership skills. What are you doing to push your leader forward? How are you creating a leader in your department head? What adaptive skills are you pushing forward? How are you modeling emergence with them? So their learning community is about leadership. Leadership around that's grounded in curriculum delivery, that's grounded in engaging experiences for students. So what you've got is it's a trickle down scaffolding from a modeling up here that comes all the way down to the student. So what have been successes? To allow for the kind of agenda we're embarking upon, we have to model an adaptive leadership that controls very little, mostly the initial agenda, but guides the process of adult interaction and leaves lots of room for emergent learning, content, and direction. Again, this is no different than the work that you do as trustees. Establish a vision, provide the resources to allow those you have nurtured to create in new and unexpected ways, new ways of doing that's going to push the learning agenda forward. That's my role here. As you are at 10,000 feet, I'm at 10,000 feet. My access to that student in that English class is through that principal, and it trickles down to the department head, to the teacher, to the student, to the parent. So I think what I want to say that is that in supporting lateral and organizational forms to emerge in our schools, we're viewing our secondary schools, we really are as R&D centers, research and development centers. These are not schools just servicing their own community, they're servicing the system, and they're playing with ideas for the benefit of the system. And so what we've done is share this create this collaborative culture, not just among students in a class, not just among teachers, but among administrators. How do we connect, not to replicate Yale and Hanson, but to diffuse the idea? What's working well there and how can we work it there? The launch and learn mentality. We're gonna make lots and lots of mistakes, but isn't that great? Because go to an architect, go to an engineer, and he's making 50,000 mistakes before he gets the right one. Unfortunately, we have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Leading and learning and risk-taking in a living laboratory. Again, research centers, laboratories, and schools. Student voice and system impact. We're talking about a co-constructed learning experience, and the co in co-constructed is student voice. So how do we get student voice and move it away from a one-off student forum, how are things going in the school, and make it more real-time and embedded in terms of strategy and operations in the school? That's what we've been working on as well. Indigenous experiences, building on our positive attendance program. How do we take our Indigenous courses and ensure that people understand they're not just for Indigenous kids, that if we're going to make a difference in society, we all need to understand what's going on. And the last one, engaged learning. And quite frankly, if the adults aren't engaged, students aren't engaged.
Right.
It goes hand in hand. And what kids need to know and learn is, what does engagement look like in a learning setting? They know what engagement looks like at home when they're on social media and playing sports and doing their thing. What does passion look like in a classroom? And so what our teachers understand now is it doesn't really matter what you're passionate about. The product's not important. The process of being passionate and working on that and developing something is what kids need to know what it looks like, how it feels, and go back to the understanding and identity, how you redefine yourself through that experience. And so the leadership challenges are many. The first is momentum. We've got a lot of things on the go. How do I ensure that I'm not the guy holding the mason jar, but that there's lots of fingerprints on it? How do I ensure that I facilitate this so that it's not me running it, but my administrators and teachers are all sharing the load? And within our operational plan, there are enough access points where you can find your passion and go into that area. How do we coalesce it together? Simplexity, it's a term I got from Kevin. Making the complex simple in terms of understanding and coherence. My issue is I move really fast and I can connect the dots, but I'm realizing that I have to be very explicit about connecting the dots. And so how do we do that and work on it in a way that makes sense to everyone? And finally, continue to find ways to motivate and encourage without pushing those we lead completely over the edge. Now I picked this cartoon. A better one was, I had these lemmings coming down and the caption read, it says, gee, Brent really isn't a lemming's lemming, is he? And he's got that. But that's a big one, because if we push too hard and too fast, then you lose them. And right now we've got multiple initiatives from ELL, English language learners, to social emotional learning, to blended learning, to inquiry-based learning, to core competencies. It's coming from all over the place. So rather than throwing it at them all at once, what are you passionate about? And let's lead it, let you lead it organically so it comes from the bottom up. And that's really all I've got. But before I open up the questions, just a couple of things. A couple of these pictures are from, we were lucky this year, or fortunate I should say, 4 times this year the elementary principals had a Dare to Lead session where all the principals were gone for the day. And what we did was every secondary principal and vice principal took a turn in an elementary school. So if you look at the top, that's Jay Pankratz, who's just walked into the elementary school for the first time, and you know what kind of day he's gonna have. To the right in the middle is a really nice one. That's Brad Hutchinson, who was principal for the day at Centennial, and those are his 2 granddaughters. On the bottom on the right is Rob Sloboda in a learning train, a reading train in elementary school, where you have to read and then talk to the person next to you about what you read, and they pass it on down the line. And me on the top is with our Indigenous kids. This year we just recently had a powerful experience where we had 6 kids, Indigenous students, come in and talk to our principals plus principals about who they are, what they're about, and how the system is both helping them and failing them. It was a very open conversation, and the reason we were able to have the open conversation is because we spent a year defining our whys and staying in the effective domain. And by staying in the effective domain and creating that through line from who we are personally to what we are professionally, it's allowed an acceptance for some really difficult conversations, and there'll be more as we push the learning agenda forward. So that's it. I'll open up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw Trustee Wilson first.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Assistant Superintendent Bondy, a couple questions for you. Earlier, the board was, prior to this meeting, the board's had a conversation about, briefly about the kids in care and about the fact that they have tuition paid for post-secondary. And of course, we have a lower than hoped for, school completion rate, but what are we doing inside the secondary schools to encourage those students to attend the post-secondary where they don't pay for tuition, but there's supports, both financial and other, for them to do that? Like, where are we at with that?
So one of the things, well, that's a very good question, Shirley, very timely as well. One of the things we're looking at is, in terms of children in care, they come with history that usually isn't acknowledged or acknowledged within the school system. They also come with, believe it or not, an incredible amount of resiliency in terms of what they've gone through. One of the things we're looking at now is how do we transition students, particularly students and children in care, from a regular graduate doctorate to adult doctorate. Adult doctorate, we still have access to secondary. So we're entering a discussion with UFV around that, transitioning students, identifying them in grade 10 and 11, and then working with them around a graduation plan, either through self-paced learning, either virtual, or working up a relationship with them. What we've done with a majority of them is moving to Bakerview, where we have lots of resources around with YCWs and one-to-one instructional methods. But the key has been, how can we change our structures to support the vision of getting there? And one of them has been changing to the adult doctorate. So that's one of the things we've been pursuing.
Because I look forward to that in future meetings.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to hearing back about it, and because I think it's one of the most important things that, opportunities that we have right now, because we, it's only recently that we've had this access for these students.
It's a moral imperative is what it is. Absolutely, yeah.
I love the comment, the descriptor replicating student learning. I think that's pretty powerful, actually, but my question around that is, we talk about the post-secondary being R&D centers, research and development, but there's also risk and demand in R&D, and I just,
There is.
we don't want, how do we ensure reward for the student? Because, over the years, there's been a year or two where something's been implemented, and it actually didn't go so well for that particular cohort. And I'm just wondering how we're addressing that.
So are you asking from the lens of post-secondary in terms of the transition or the actual high school experience?
The actual high school experience where you referenced the R&D centers.
Yeah. So what we've got right now, we started with the grade, we started like last year with the grade 9, which has been really a great starting place because it's not part of the graduation plan, right? And so that's where we started taking a lot of the risks. In grade 10, 11, and 12, the great thing that's changed when you reference things in the past like year 2000 and all the other stuff that we saw that came and went by the wayside, this one here is firmly grounded in the work of full and deeper learning. The change isn't so much the students and the risk taking. The change is convincing the adults in the system that now that you no longer have, you've had this albatross around your neck all these years that you used to call provincial exams, and I have to teach this content, and I can't do this because I gotta cover this. Now we've removed the albatross, but what's happened is it's become very obvious that for many it wasn't an albatross but an anchor that kept them afloat. So how do we remove that and understand and get them to understand that we're respecting them as professionals, the ministry is respecting you as professionals, you can do and choose what you want to teach in your classroom and make it successful at the same time. So it's not so much the kids as it is the adults, and that's why our theory of action starts with the adults and trickles down. Thank you. Great question though.
Trustee Anderson.
Back on strategies, 3.1 says you increase graduation rate. Your target was 90% and you went 91.3. Way to go for that. I mean, that's kudos for you. But then we get down to 3.12 and you're off target. It says 81%. What do you have plans to hit that target?
Can you tell me what 3.12
Well,
is?
increase school completion rate for Indigenous students.
Yep. That's
3.12.
So we have started. I'll speak to how we're approaching it this year. One of the first steps is that accessing street data, and by street data I mean student voice. What are the students' needs, particularly with Indigenous students and with all students? We're the only business where we don't really care what the consumer thinks because we know they're coming back every year, right? So how do we change that, right? And one of them in particular is Indigenous kids. How do we have conversations with them where they can tell us what's wrong with the system? They can tell us what they bring to the system. Easier said than done. How do we create a construct and a space where they feel comfortable coming in to talk to who they are viewing as the forefathers of oppression and be able to have that discussion with us? And then how are we able to take this critical discussion and accept it and move forward? So we're starting to have those conversations now, one, with the students. The second one is we're looking at taking Indigenous courses and not offering them as one-off, but offering them as a package. So we're gonna have an Indigenous course with an elective course, so you can get 12 credits wrapped into 3, have some Indigenous kids in there as well, but having regular kids as well. So how do we do it? We address them by addressing their culture, by saying your culture is really, when we're talking about deeper learning, it's Aboriginal Aboriginal perspectives and worldviews. So how do we blend that in and validate that and make them feel validated? So long answer to your question, ongoing conversations with the students in terms of what they need and want. And then changing our structures to support that. I'm confident, Phil.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna put a paycheck on this one. That number will increase. Will be much better
I
next
will
year.
be asking you next year.
You can quote me. Yeah, I know you will.
Year.
I know you will.
Is that recorded?
That's recorded. That's recorded.
All right.
And one more, on page 6,
Yeah.
grade to grade transition. So I don't know whether you want to bring that up or not.
Yep.
And we have from 11 to 12.
Yep.
11 said it was 93 and 12 was 74.
That's right.
Why?
That's
the same thing?
That's Indigenous. That's not in our for our regular students, it's grade 11 is 95 and grade 12 is 86.
That's the same, yeah, it's the same pool.
It's the same
same
pool.
sort of
It's
thing.
a myriad of reasons. A lot of kids. There's part-time work. There's internships. There's a whole bunch of other things. This one here speaks to lack of engagement or connection, and that's why I put that one up there. I didn't want this to be a glowing report where I just come in and say everything is great. I did want to acknowledge the fact that we do have some significant work, and what I'm hoping is that you again, coherence, connect the dots, that what I was talking about, the work that we're doing, is going to lead to better engagement and better practices in the classroom and in schools. So they'll want to come.
Next year.
Yeah. One of our students during the thing a couple weeks ago during our panel said, you know, you don't understand, you don't understand how hard it is for me to get from my bedroom to my locker. Another kid told a story, you know, I tried to do it for the hockey team last year and didn't make it. I came late for the practice, and coach said I was too late, couldn't make it, and he wouldn't listen to me. And the story was, my sister was pregnant, I was in the hospital, I couldn't get a ride there, I phoned around, I finally found a cab, I paid $30, I got there, and no one heard my story. So you take that, you know, and you know he's telling that story 12 times over in his community, and what's it say, right? Mm-hmm. And so, Phil, it's really quite a simple story. Any day a student is in school is a good day. Any day they're in test learning is an exceptional day. And that's the mantra that has to be thrown around by every teacher in every school. And we're there, we're getting there.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you for that. Trustee Neufeld.
I've got a broad topic that I'll get to, but I still remember when I first came on as a trustee back in 2005, I remember our high schools and how siloed they were, how competitive they were, and how the leaders in the schools, it was their school, and it's taken a long time for that culture to change, and I think you've been here now 7, 8 years?
This is year 6.
Oh, 6 only, okay. Because I remember interviewing you, and I remember the shoes you had to fill. And so first I want to just say that thank you for leaving your mark on the second year. I can really see how you have poured your heart into this and have implemented and risked a lot of things. I know secondary is probably the most difficult part of our educational system to really, really impact. So my comment is this: when I hear what your report, I hear 2 words. I hear flexibility and creativity. What I don't see in our system, because of the court case 2 years ago, is flexibility and creativity with ratios and formulas. So my question to you is, how much has that impacted us implementing some of these things? Because I think it has changed our system over the last 2 years. And I can see it impacting opportunities for kids down the road. I can see it also limiting what we can do in our secondary. I just wanted to, I don't know if you're okay to answer it or what you think is, how much has the last 2 years impacted our inability to be flexible and creative?
You know, that's a great question. I would say that secondary is the last bastion of creativity and flexibility. I don't see that being an issue. I don't see the collective agreement, the ministries and the designations. I don't see that being the issue. For me, the issue is the structures we have don't support the vision, and it's the structures that are historical, from our timetable to the way we frame the day to the way we deliver our classroom experience.
But some of that is the language in the agreement though too, isn't it, or not?
It is, but it's not stifling.
Okay.
It's not holding us back from making the changes that we want to make. What's holding us back is you know, where do you start? You just start. You start doing something, right? It's that initiation point, that access point, you know, the champion that says, here we go, right? And so this goes back to the thing I was talking about, scale. You know, it's happening in classrooms, it's happening in departments. How do you scale it so it's the whole school and the whole district?
And just to piggyback on it, how different are the teachers with that whole flexibility and trying to figure out new ways to do it with the new teachers coming in versus those who've been here 10, 15 years in the teaching role? Do you see is that, like you're saying, it's the adults in the room, and is that part of it too?
You know, by focusing on that theory of action, that leadership makes a difference. By empowering our department heads and actually acknowledging them as educational leaders, that you're not just ordering another 20 copies of it.
Right.
You know, that you're actually leading conversations on actual instruction. That's how you go. That's how you do it. And so I hate to differentiate between new and young teachers.
Okay, fair.
I think what you do is you change the conversation. You change the way you structure your conversations.
Well, I love the direction secondary is going, and I know it takes, like you say, you can connect the dots. It's a matter of the system has to move, and that takes time. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Trustee Latham.
Yes, I have maybe a convoluted way of getting to
That's what I
my
just did.
question, but you know, as a former teacher, you know, what you're talking about, that replicating of student learning, the launch and learn. I think a lot of teachers go through that. If they're really brave, they'll try new things. And then to the teacher capstone that teachers are sharing with their staff. I mean, it blows my mind, literally.
Be courageous.
Because you do have to be courageous, very courageous. I guess my question is around some of the deeper learning and making sure, like you said, you know, we want our kids to talk about it. Well, there's many different ways to speak. And I really believe with a lot of our learners, it's not with this and paper. And sometimes it's not even with voice. And so it's trying to make sure, and I think we can do it within the secondary school. You know, how do we do those crossovers where we're putting the art teacher with the science teacher? We're putting the drama teacher with the math teacher. You know, there's got to be some ways of that whole, you know, how do you show your learning? We just had some middle school students here, and the one young lady, she's done a mural, but the story behind the mural, oh my goodness. But for her, obviously, her methodology of speaking and of portraying the project is through art. And so I guess, you know, how do we...
Think about your question focuses on how do you identify strength, how do you move into a strength-based identification of kids in terms of what they can do and what they can't do. And part of that, the biggest part of that, is that relational piece. Do they have a relationship with a significant relationship with an adult in the building that knows their learning style and who they are? Part of the intent behind the team teaching, you know, we can talk about what it's doing for the adults, but the other piece is what it's doing for the relationships with the kids. Now you've got two teachers who are actually having discussions about kids that they teach and sharing information. This is what Billy's doing today. This is what Janie's doing today. And so now you don't have conversations about kids that just may happen in the staff room. Does anyone here teach Stan? Does anyone here teach Corky? And maybe you might have someone at the table there. Now you've got actual conversations happening all the time with these kids, you know, about these kids. And I think that's how you start discovering their strength. It's all in the power of the relationship, right? So we've spent a lot of time as administrators talking about our strength and actually opening up ourselves to each other and telling pretty intimate stories as we move through this deeper learning journey together, right? Now, you gotta feel safe, and you gotta be in the right place to do it, and no kid is gonna come forward and tell you that, you know, but in that power of relationship, now they're going to know that they have an access point, an adult in the building that they can go to.
The human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, wonderful.
Trustee Paul.
Actually, a couple of the things that I was going to comment on was touched on by one of my colleagues, so I won't belabor that because I think you responded to all the questions, other than the comment that I had, because when Darlene McDonald presented to us at Education a couple weeks ago, she touched on some of these things because you guys are very interconnected with the work that you do, and I loved the phrase that she used, and I always write down things that I need to remember. And she started a lot of sentences in summary at the end of her presentation with, "Be unsettled that," was how she introduced. And I'm looking at just your 6-year completion rate chart here, looking at last year, and I say to myself, I should be unsettled that still 9% of our students with no learning challenges that are not, you know, having a background of anything that presents them with significant challenges other than life are still not graduating. I should be unsettled that 20% of our Indigenous students are not graduating. I should be unsettled that our diverse learners, 30% of them aren't making it. and children in care, whatever the drop down last year to 42.8%, that's 57% of our kids in care didn't graduate. So I thought, be unsettled, what does that mean? So I looked it up. I'm a dictionary person, and the description that it gave me that I liked said, is not yet resolved. And I love that as our attitude as a school district, that we don't accept
Not yet
these things.
resolved.
This is just not yet resolved. And when you talk to us about these strategies and about how you're going to the student for the personal stories, I talk about the 100 project that we did with the kids and how labor intensive it was to track we tracked the kids that started in grade 8. We looked at their kindergarten right through graduation, and we found every single one of those kids in that cohort for whatever the year was that they started, 2008, 7, 6, they started school, and we tracked them through graduation and tracked their individual stories as a project. And every one of those kids that didn't graduate, we found out their individual story to trace back what more could we have done for them in the course of the system. And I see that as a learning opportunity we had that is playing out now in the, hey, let's just go to the source now when it matters and engage these kids and the Indigenous learners that came out to your PVP meetings and the communication they gave you about the story about, why he was late for practice. Those are the things that move us forward, and those are the things that are going to resolve some of the unresolved things that we have. And this excites me to hear that we're doing this work, because we know that it's going to be effective, because we're now listening to the kids, and we're not just looking. We have to look at data, but we have to look at these kids as individuals and what they're going through. So thank you for the work that you're doing, Gina.
I will tell you that, be unsettled. I'll tell you a line that I gave a colleague of mine. I went for dinner on Saturday in Vancouver, and this will tell you how unsettled I am. We were talking about graduation rates, and he's from a district that's bigger than ours, but is nowhere as good as ours. And
of course not.
And but having said that, he said, "Well, you should be pretty proud. You got a graduation rate of 91.3%." He didn't say he said 90+%. And be unsettled. I responded with, you know what? There are 147 kids right now who probably don't share that same opinion. We had 147 kids that didn't graduate last year. So I know what the numbers are. I know the names. And my goal is to get through. My goal is in the next 4 to 5 years to make sure that we don't have 147 anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, I love your theory of action. If you want kids connected to deeper learning, you have to have principals connected to deeper learning. You have to have department heads connected to deeper learning, teachers connected to deeper learning. I mean, everybody's going through the process together. So, and you've explained it so very well here.
Trustees.
And trustees. I'm not sure you'll ever get us there, but at least I better understand your theory of, and it makes perfect sense. And it seems like the end results we're starting to see the end results as well. So. Thank you for your presentation. Again, this is an action item. So as it relates to, all right, well, everybody knows what the words say. So thank you, Trustee Anderson. Trustee Neufeld.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and your time.
No, it's good.
All right.
It's where the rubber meets the road.
And here's next up is our notice of intent for our local school calendar for the 2020-21 school year.
Okay. As the School Act so demands, boards have some latitude in setting their local calendars based on total hours of instruction, and this has been a authority vested in boards by the ministry. It does require us to have meaningful and thoughtful consultation, and in this case, in particular, have the approval and support of the ATU to the extent that it complies with the collective agreement, or their support if it steps outside that collective agreement. So what I'm bringing forward here to the board is a recommendation to take this calendar out for consultation. You will see as you look at the calendar, just touch on a few of the highlights with it. It's actually very similar to the calendar that we have now, which is very similar to a lot of the districts in and around us. that we have a 2-week Christmas break, a 2-week spring break. You see Good Friday on April 2nd and Easter on April 5th. It's a total of 180 days of instruction. In order to create the 2-week spring break, you will notice that some changes is made to the minutes of each day, where it is 293, 295, and 318, respectively, elementary, middle, and secondary. Under the Act, this calendar has to be put out for consultation before the end of February, and we must return to the ministry with a calendar before the end of March. So we're within that timeline, and so I propose here that the board support this motion to go out, and at the next meeting, I believe it's March the 10th, I'll bring back some evidence of feedback from parents and students and staff as to their thoughts on the calendar, which will put the board in a position to make a decision as you see fit. So February 12th to March the 5th is the proposed dates for public and employee consultation. March the 10th, I will then bring this back for the board for consideration, and it is our intention that by March the 13th then we would submit this calendar to the Ministry of Education. Okay.
Happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Do we have a seconder? Okay, I now saw Trustee Anderson and discussion. Trustee Wilson?
Thank you, Chair Peterson. I just have a question. Superintendent Godden, you mentioned that it must be in consultation with the local teachers union. And what if that doesn't happen, and has it happened?
It has happened. In order to even put the calendar out, we have to do this. So so if it doesn't happen, then what I bring forward to you here is a calendar with the 1-week spring break, because that's the standard. The only way that the board or boards can step outside, obviously, a collective agreement that both parties agree to is with the agreement of both parties. And so in this case, it has happened. In an absence of that, what would happen would be a default back to a 1-week spring break.
Another comment.
So regardless of the public's opinion on this in the consultation process, the reality is that if the union didn't agree, there wouldn't be a 2-week spring break.
That is correct.
Right, so the feedback that we receive is just about how it's laid out, probably, is because it's not a vote.
Right. So I mean, in times past, if you recall, when there was a standard calendar, we would have 1 or 2 options. You'd move certain days around and so on. But with the change in the legislation, really, this is people can make comments about, where non-instructional days are, or report cards, or so on. But the existence in and of itself of it, no. The only way that this would occur is with the agreement of the board, and in this case, the ATU.
Okay, so with that, when this proceeds out to the public for input from both employee groups and from stakeholders in the public, we'll have some clarity around that this is not, it is an as-is option, just seeking responses?
In effect, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Trustee Newfield.
I'm wondering if we could have maybe a phrase connected to this, that this consultation is subject to, because I don't know if the public knows that if the ATU and the board does not agree on the calendar, then this won't be the calendar. And I'm wondering if this would be, if they agreed to it, then they assume this is going to be the calendar, and I don't want to set us up for that. So I'm wondering if there's a phrase in there saying this is just for your whatever. But at the end of the day, the Board of Education and the ATU have to agree on a calendar, or it refers back to this, because I think the public needs to know that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying to you here, though, is the fact that you have this one is a sign that the ATU has agreed.
Oh, okay.
Because I wouldn't,
okay.
If they hadn't, then I couldn't in good,
okay.
Right? I'd then be in violation of the collective agreement.
I misunderstood.
In doing that, but it bears acknowledgement that the both parties have to be in agreement, because the collective agreement, for instance, says that there's only a 1 week spring break. So if
Right.
the minute you decide you're going to have a 2 week spring break, then both the board and the ATU must agree that you are now going to jointly
I missed it.
change the terms of the collective agreement.
Thank you for correcting. Thank you.
Trustee Wilson?
Just another comment, because, you know, one of the things, this calendar and the number of minutes per year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just have to make this comment, and I'll probably make it again at the future meeting, but we have this opportunity to be flexible for the needs of our community and our students, go outside the bookends, maybe look at balanced calendaring, which would be good for everybody concerned, and yet our hands are tied. So it's not really that it's flexible, not entirely. It's a way to provide an extra week of time without actually being flexible for the benefit of everybody from an educational perspective. I'm just throwing that out there.
So the board a number of years ago, gave direction to staff to, in the spirit of the act changing and the board and the ministry going away from a standard calendar, to just give us the minutes so that you could place the minutes wherever, so that you could potentially have a balanced calendar. That was its intent. What that intent did not quite acknowledge, at least not publicly, was that if you had a collective agreement which spoke otherwise, then you have to work closely with the local union to be able to do it. So while the ministry policy says, you have this flexibility, in fact you don't.
Right.
You have the flexibility if you can negotiate it. And so, you'll recall that we had this conversation, for instance, I think it was one of our schools on the west side, Harry Sayers, staff had looked at it as a potential, and so there are opportunities, because there are schools in many districts that have their own balanced calendar, while the district as a whole has a different one, and so the opportunity exists. But I guess what I'll say is, the point I'll punctuate is that you have to do that in collaboration and with the agreement of the teachers union.
Which, to use your word, punctuates the fact that we actually don't have flexibility.
Well, we don't. Yes, you don't have that without the collaborative effort. No.
Right.
And I think if we were to test our trustees in the room here, we'd say we'd love to open up more discussion with the Abbotsford Teachers Union about more flexibility.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we have talked about a lot, and it would be great to get that conversation going.
And for those who don't recall, I believe this calendar started in 2002 or 3, but it's been a fair number of years that we've had a 2 week spring break.
Okay, so this is, a motion is before you. We had, a mover and a seconder.
Voters.
And we need voters. And our last item in the education piece here is our strategic plan refresh.
So
I was just going to say the mandate of our strategic plan kind of ends at the end of this school year. And I think we're pretty proud of where we've come along in the development and implementation of that. But it's time to look at it again, to refresh it. And we're going through a process by which we're going to be seeking input from lots of different folks. One group, in fact, who we saw just earlier today. And as a little commercial for the huge audience in front of us, we would hope that you will get involved in providing us some feedback that we can use in this refreshment. Anyhow, I'll turn it over to the superintendent to explain that even better than I have.
Yep. So there are 4 big pillars to the strategic plan, and you saw one of them tonight around the student success pillar, particularly at secondary. You saw one about parent community engagement. So those are big pillars, but as your strategic plan winds down, I think you have to be really careful to make sure that it stays real, that it is actually connected to the reality of your own school district and your own community. And so it should never, ever, ever be something that should be on the shelf. It should be active, and you should create multiple opportunities periodically for people to give feedback about course corrections. It is never going to be an about face. So some of the things that you heard, for instance, tonight about our secondary schools, we're never going to go in the opposite direction. But there are things that we can do. For instance, when you hear about the importance of teacher connection, there are things that we can do for instance, around how we support Indigenous learners. So the thought exchange is the primary tool that we will have out as a part of this process to invite parents and students and our staff, obviously, to give us their thoughts. And over the course of the next weeks, we're going to pull that information together. We've got a date plan on the 26th of this month to do some consolidation of the information with, again, a bunch of our stakeholders. The board is holding consultations with community partners. So, I mean, it's an exciting time because it gives you a chance to validate, to celebrate what's already been done, but also to keep your eye, kind of sharply on the vision that you have for improving opportunities for kids in the district. And so, one of the big goals that I think that we'll have here is, approving the strategic plan and the budget at the same time, at the same meeting in June. And we have not done that before. So that's new territory for us. And I think this board has set a really good example provincially about strategy management, and this is the next part of the next tier, is using this process to refresh, but also to use it to show a great connection between your aspirations and your resource allocation as a part of that. So we encourage people to participate, give us your thoughts. Over the course of the next few months, we'll be sharing back what we heard, and then ultimately in June we'll be sharing what we're going to do as a consequence of what we heard.
For the good folks that are here, you see that we have a fairly aggressive schedule for that refresh, and we're right on schedule, and I think we should be pretty proud of the fact that we're in kind of a bit of uncharted waters, and probably but we're seeking feedback from all our user groups. We always value it, but in a way more thorough way. So we encourage your input. And I saw Trustee Wilson.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, comments. One is in the very first paragraph, and I think it's the very first sentence actually. It says that the Board of Education must enter into a new round of public consultations, but there is actually no requirement for us to do that. That's a decision that the board made. I'm just clarifying that because it's not a must, it's a desire to do so. And I think that that's really important because it changes the message to the public and our employee groups and stakeholders. It says, you know what, we're considering you as we develop the plan rather than it's a have to do. So I'm just hoping that that's how we can present that.
That's a good point.
Also, bear with me, will we be doing a media release with the board chair, from the board chair about this? I know that there's a rollout of the strategic plan on a video, but I'm hoping that there's a media release.
Yes.
Led by the board chair on behalf of the board, because it's our process. That the process belongs to the board and this is how it's rolling out. Okay, and then there's something else. The April 15th blog from board superintendent. I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity, again, profiling the board, that there's a guest spot, because there's talking about the, if you look at the dates up there, now I have to bring it back because my eyes aren't that good.
April 15th.
Yes, and what does it actually say?
Superintendent's
No,
blog
that's okay.
talk about engagement, process, results, and next steps, no?
About engagement, process, results, and next steps.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I can appreciate that, but I'm hoping that this is an opportunity because the board doesn't have any other mechanism to make statements other than media release and like through the website. Maybe that there could be a guest spot for the board chair, a particular one, with some comments, just talking about also how, the board's reaction and response to that, to the process, results, and next steps, as a way to just profile that this is from the board and we appreciate what's coming back our way. And then I actually think, to the superintendent, just because I have forgotten, could you remind us, we are speaking with some stakeholders and employee groups about the, we have questions for them regarding feedback. Can you remind me what the two questions are?
Two questions are, the first one is really to invite the stakeholders to tell us, in light of their mandate, for working with students, what should the board consider in developing in refreshing its strategic plan? So what are the things that the board should consider in light of their mandate? And the other one is, what are the opportunities for us to work together collaboratively on that mandate?
That's all from me, thank you.
All right. Yes, Trustee Neufeld.
Well, thank you. Having been involved provincially with different districts, you really get to realize how far this district has gone in the last 10 years regarding strategic planning, and also now tying that together with our budget. And for the public, it's not a folder that we create that sits on a shelf. It's actually a living document that is constantly changing because we're constantly adding information into it. So from the moment we create the strategic plan, there's already new information coming into it to change it, because we're always putting in information. So I don't see us deviating too much from the previous plan, but there might be some things in there that have changed over the last 4 years that we maybe need to refocus and put more energy into. And so it's a great opportunity for us to get input, for people to let us know, are we on track, are we off track, what are we missing? And it's a great opportunity, and we're looking forward to hearing that, because we don't want to miss the mark. And so it's important for us to know where are we at and where are we going, and what do people think about those things, especially our partner groups. We had a partner in here earlier, and it was absolutely informative of the things that they saw from their point of view of the things that are happening, the needs in our community, and it's going to give us information to strategically plan for the next 4 or 5 years. And so it's exciting.
And just to add to that, we had 2 presentations that were, for our ability to hold people accountable for that plan. We had 2 of them tonight.
Yeah.
And we have, that's a regular occurrence. So we should be pretty pleased with our strat plan, and we're going to even be more pleased once we go through this refresh project. So again, commercial, get involved.
Yeah, please.
All right. Anything else? So are we at the first of our question periods? If you have a question related to what we have talked about in the agenda up to this point, we'd ask you to step forward, please, state your name, and then direct your question to myself as the chair, and I will either attempt to answer or redirect to somebody else. So, any questions? Any questions? Going once, going twice. Wow.
Yeah, I'll just ask. I just had a question about the IB program at Abby Senior. It's not really related to the MYP presentations, but should I save that for later?
You know what? If you step forward, if it's something we can answer fairly quickly here, yes, because it's not on our agenda, but I know it's a discussion that we have had. Okay, so.
Maybe, yeah. My name's Mike Roach. I've got kids at Abby Senior, 2 of them, grades 9 and 10, in what they're calling the pre-IB program. I know it's not an official program, and we went to an info meeting earlier this week, I guess, and learned that there's talk of discontinuing that program. So I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about our feelings on the program. My son's here. He's in the program. He's not a prop today. He just happened to be at school. We had to pick him up.
And I'm going to stop you there because it's not a question I'm hearing, but I'm going to answer what I think your question is, okay? And most certainly, if you have some more feedback, please at another time send it to me. But nothing will change as far as course offerings for those kids who were in what was called a pre-IB program. But we cannot call it that because legally we don't have a right to call it that. So the course offerings are still there, those kids going into the 11-12 program will very likely be encouraged to take those very courses.
He's got younger siblings.
Yeah. Now I know the answer, and our concern is our recognition is that the 11 and 12 program is a choice program that kids from all over the district can come to. The course offerings before that are offered to any student as long as there is room, and catchment students take precedence.
Right.
Okay.
So you may have seen my email from
I have, yes.
prior, and I just wanted to say that how important it is, I feel, that a program as important as IB, especially in today's world with universities being so selective, with no provincial exams, that all students in Abbotsford should have the ability to be part of the IB program if they show the desire and the aptitude for a program like that, and not just the diploma program in grades 11 and 12. My wife Winsome went through the program. The dropout rate was massive when you don't have a proper feeder program into the IB program. So I just wanted to ask this board to really give strong consideration to making sure there's a district program, some kind of a feeder program that's open to all district students for the IB program. I think it's essential.
And I would say that in all our secondary schools, there are course offerings that would give them that very same opportunity, whether you want to call it pre-IB or not.
Yeah, I disagree.
Honors
I disagree
programs and so on.
completely.
Okay, well then, but thank you for
With
that.
knowledge of the program and so on, right? Like, I mean, I think the program needs to be designed as a preparatory program for grade 11 and 12 diploma. There needs to be an aspect of that in it, like an MYP.
Thank
that
you.
would go for grades 9 and 10 as well.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's move to operations. Oh, the amended annual budget bylaw for 2019-2020. And we have wonderful Linda Peters.
Pie.
And I'm
Pie. She brought pie.
Looks like blueberry.
Good play on words. Hey, can you pass that down? Can you pass the pies down?
Sorry.
No, he can do it.
Well, I could do it. I thought
Feel
there was.
deceived right now.
Pie just for you?
Yeah.
Blueberry, I can tell.
There you go. Oh.
Now I just want pie.
It's all right. Oh, blueberry pie.
Yeah, I got one. Okay, that's good.
All right, so this is a requirement of the School Act. When the operating grant is adjusted, the ministry may require districts to amend their annual operating budget. So this is part of the annual process where by the end of February, we're required to amend our budget, and that's the information for you. So I'll turn it over to our Director of Finance, Linda Peters.
So you have in your package the amended annual budget, which is in the format prescribed by the ministry, and all districts are required to submit their budget in this format. We'll move to, I'm not sure what page it will be for you, but it'll be statement 2. It's the first one with the numbers, and this is the overall summary of all of our 3 funds. We have 3 funds: operating, special purpose, and capital, and this ties everything together on the first statement. And it gives a summary of our enrollments in our amended budget versus our projected budget, preliminary budget, and you can see that we were a little under in the number of students that we had in September versus what we had projected. There's an overall summary of the revenue and expenditures by different types of grants and the expenses, and you'll see the grand total at the end is a negative $705,000. Now this, we're not going to spend too much time on this schedule because this includes capital and amortization. So we're going to move along to Schedule 2, which is the beginning of the operating schedules. And that's our basic operating grant, and that's the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about today. So on the Schedule 2, we have a summary of our revenue and expenditures. Revenues broken down into some broad categories: provincial revenue, which are our basic operating grants, and make up the big blue portion of the operating pie chart, of the revenue pie chart. 92% of our funding comes from operating grants. We have tuition, which is international tuition, and that makes up about 3% of our budget, $6.8 million. And then all of their other revenues, various student fees, that would include fees for busing and academies, rentals and leases of our properties, and investment income. That rakes up the additional 5% of our budget. In our expenses, reported in 4 broad categories: instruction, operations, admin, and transportation and housing. And the greatest portion of that goes to instruction. With this budget, we were anticipating 86% of the budget would be spent on instruction. The next highest section is operations and maintenance, about 9%, and that's translates to about $18 million. Instruction was $168 million. Transportation and housing, $3.6 million, makes up 2%, and district admin, $5.7 million, makes up about 3%. And those are all on your cervical pie. Schedule 2A breaks down the revenue into more detail and gives some more detail on the type of grants and the various items that we will receive there, a little more in all the different types of grants that we receive, as well as how those fees and other revenues break down into different categories. I actually missed something, I'm sorry. To go back to Schedule 2, the difference, the net revenue and expense is $2.8 million. We then anticipate that throughout our district, through various programs, through schools and different operating budgets, that we'll purchase about $400,000 worth of capital assets. And that would be items of $5,000 and over. We'll also be transferring $900,000 to capital reserve for the Eagle Mountain School. And so the revenue minus expenditures leaves us with a total, and after the transfers, a total deficit of $2.8 million, which we would draw from accumulated surplus. That was kind of a big part. So then Schedule 2 gives you more, 2A gives you more detail of the revenue. Schedule 2B breaks down the types of expenditures we have by some broader categories again. Teachers, our salaries are listed by broad groups, teachers, principals, education assistants, and so forth. Our teachers have some changes that have happened on this schedule between our annual budget and the amended annual budget. We have an adjustment in what we had projected for teachers because of the change in enrollment of fewer students that we received. We were also able to reclass some positions into the enhancement fund. And then we had some positions in contingency that we didn't have to use as well. So that's a decrease you'll see there of about $1 million or so from the annual budget that you passed last spring. We also have an increase in our support staff, in education assistants and support staff. They fall into those two categories of about 2%, and that's the settlement that we've just reached in December. And additionally, we have just, as of Friday, received the information from the ministry that will be funded this year. So we will be receiving the funding for that, which comes to about $770,000. And that was part of the adjustment in revenues as well. Benefits has an increase over last year of about $2.7 million. Now we did an estimate for that in the preliminary budget, and the biggest part of that is from the employer health tax. So we do have some offsetting revenue from the ministry for that, about $1.4 million. And there are some other things that kind of bounce around a bit, but we do anticipate the benefit costs to have that much of an increase over last year. We then have our supplies and services budget, and you may recall from other years that in the spring we have a conservative estimate on that, and then in the amended version we include school surpluses and other department surpluses that might have carried over, so it increases the value from column the right column to the middle column. So we're currently projecting to spend about $24 million on supplies and services, bringing out a total of $196 million in expenses. And then Schedule 2C is the same information, just presented in a little more detail by types of programs, instruction and careers, and et cetera. It goes on for 2 pages, so it's great reading. And then Schedules 3 and 4 give detail on our special purpose funds, which includes things like our annual facilities grants, school-generated funds, which are the school bank accounts, the classroom enhancement fund, community links. Those sorts of things are in our special purpose funds, and those have to balance. They are at a net zero in all of those. And then Schedule 4 is our capital fund and the transactions that happen there, all of which originate in the operating fund or from capital projects funded by the ministry.
Okay, questions, comments? Yeah. Trustee Anderson.
In maintenance, statement 2, it said that we're down 1 million, which is good. But how come we're down 1 million? What did they do to save us 1 million? That was Schedule 2, I had it down here, or statement 2.
I believe that stems largely from the capital, the adjustment in capital. When we did the preliminary budget, we had estimated a higher amount for our annual facilities grant. But the timing works out a little oddly for our annual facilities grant. When we do the budget in the spring, we don't yet know when that will be spent. So we include the whole thing. But in fact, a certain portion of it was spent prior to the end of the 18-19 school year. So we don't budget for that again, and we're not allowed to anticipate what the facilities grant might be between April and June of this year. So the two things run on different times, different cycles. Our budget year runs from July to June. The annual facilities grant runs from April till March.
So we've already spent that other
That's
million.
right. That's right. But we spent it last year.
Okay. I was just wondering how come all of a sudden we saved 1 million.
Trustee Anderson, if you go to Schedule 2, where you see the statement of in the operating fund, you'll see the difference there, in operations and maintenance, and it's pretty close to bang on the same number we had in the budget, in the preliminary budget. It's gone up, about $90,000, $80,000.
And you'll also see on Schedule 4, the very first line is, you'll see on the first column it's 1.7 million, and on the amended budget it's 2.7 million. That's completely exactly what I was referencing. When it gets into that statement too, that's when it adds all those things together and makes it less clear.
When I started going through all this, it was.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee Wright.
Just a question, maybe Secretary Treasurer or the second pie chart. I wish it was a pie, but how are we compared to this pie chart to similar districts in the province, say the Langley's of the world or which is about 19,000? Are we sort of similar in instructions or more or less? Or can we have that information?
Yeah, and we always have that. If you look back into our first budget meeting and when we start our budget process for the given fiscal year, some of the first information we share is how do we compare to other districts. So I can tell you, only because we had some information we've been looking at in our transportation review, that we typically spend more in instruction than the provincial average, and we spend more in instruction than most of the lower mainland districts, and we spend less in areas like administration and operations and maintenance. So operation and maintenance, we have one of the lowest costs as a percentage of budget, as a per student cost, as any metric you might want to look at, and that relates to the efficient operation of our facilities. And so in the administration, district admin area as well, we are one of the lowest. I think Surrey is lower than us in district admin, but there's some economies of scale that go on in that district, being the largest district. So we're efficient in that area as well. That allows us to spend that additional 2 or 3% sometimes in instruction. So there's a lot of detail on that in the budget process as we get going on that.
Oh, thank you for that, and kudos. whole district.
Trustee Newville.
Either Ms. Peters or our Secretary Treasurer, what's a healthy percentage of our budget to carry in as a surplus for maintenance of buildings from year to year, things that come up that are or incidental things? What's a healthy percentage for us to carry in?
So we shouldn't go, we should be in the 2 to 2.5% of the budget range.
Which is
in
about?
unrestricted accumulated surplus. So which is where I think we're at 2% right now. If we were to look at, when we start developing next year's budget, one of the things that we have to look at is that we can't be attacking our surplus anymore in next fiscal year. So that operating deficit we have needs to be eliminated in this budget cycle so that we don't dip into that unrestricted surplus of somewhere between 2 and 2.5%.
And that leads me to my next comment. With Eagle Mountain School coming up, or the school at Eagle Mountain, we've had to contribute a certain amount because the government asked us to, and that came out of our
surplus, accumulated surplus.
And so in some ways, we need to be fiscally responsible, and the more fiscally responsible we are, it seems like the ministry then, if you're fiscally responsible, then takes that chunk and puts it in somewhere where we're saving it for something else, and so it diminishes our ability as a board to be flexible with our budget as far as implementing new ideas, so on and so forth. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the total that over 3 years we're gonna be putting into that school?
2.5 million.
2.5 million. Thank you.
All right. And I think, I feel the hackles of all board members being raised on that.
It's just
on
frankly,
that,
truthfully
Yes.
sad.
Yeah.
Move to approve.
Okay, so
all
we're
3
we're
readings?
being asked to approve all 3 readings here. Trustee Rye, Trustee Wilson, all right?
We're in the speed clicking.
And we're on speed clicking, okay. First reading. Oh, let's finish this one here too. Okay. All right.
That School District 34 Abbotsford amend an annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2019-2020 be given first reading. So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, I saw Trustee Neufeld on a tie, so I'm gonna say I'm looking this way, so Trustee Latham.
Pass it to the right.
Does that say something about him? He
There
doesn't lean left, he leans right? No.
I don't know, I think.
It's a basketball analogy.
Oh,
There we
okay.
go.
Right,
Yeah.
come on.
Move second reading.
Oh, we're just finishing off this one. Okay,
Trustee Rye.
Trustee Rye,
Second.
Trustee Anderson, second reading.
Should I?
And who's gonna read?
That
Okay,
School District number 34 Abbotsford amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2019-2020 specifying an expenditure of $229,401,457 be given third reading, considered and finally passed and adopted on this 11th day of February 2020.
thank you. Seconded by Trustee Pauls. And that almost ends our process. Trustee Wilson, I don't think we got you yet. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Second quarter financial report. It continues to be exciting. Thank you. Thank you very much, as always.
Thank you very much, Ms. Peters.
So our second quarter financial information at December 31st is presented to you. It's a comparison to where we were at last December. I would say that we're on track, I think, to be on our budget targets. I've looked at the January month-end report as well, and it's looking actually even a little bit better than this one. So I think budget-wise, we're on target. So I would take any questions if you have any.
Okay, maybe I do have a question. I don't know if you can answer it. We're putting our strategic plan together. we are drafting, we're gonna be passing a budget shortly. So as a board, what's the dollar amount of flexibility that we'll have as a board to start initiatives or to support initiatives that aren't already spoken for? Like I want us and the public to know what we're actually talking about. We're not talking about $200 million. What are we talking about?
You're talking about likely somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5% of your budget.
For all the new initiatives, okay, thank you, just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, and that was for information. Okay, unless there's anything else, let's see, what are we up to? Appointment of auditors. All right, and I'll have you speak to this too, Secretary Treasurer Bellestock.
Okay, we went through an RFP process as required in our administrative procedure to appoint auditors, and KPMG, our existing auditors, were the successful proponent, and we recommend approving them as auditors for a 3-year period with 2 one-year renewal options.
Okay, Trustee Anderson, thank you.
Second with a comment?
Trustee Neufeld. And your comment?
Well, I think we talked about this before. Though we have the same audit organization looking at it, am I correct in saying, Secretary Treasurer, that different eyes actually look at our books? And then if we could record the actual members of KPMG who looked at our books so that we can, from year to year, be assured that we have different eyes looking at our books so we don't have the same people looking at our books, because that could be problematic.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So Finance Department has made note of that from Audit Committee, that we will have a record in the audit log of who the individual auditors on site were. Even though the partner in charge typically stays the same, but the actual people that are here doing the physical audit will be part of that audit file.
Thank you for that.
Okay, great. All right, transportation review. And again, I'll keep that to Secretary Treasurer Bellestock.
Nothing huge to add. I've given you a sort of a summary of where we're at in this process. Right now, I'll just give you an update that we've asked transportation to begin a complete redesign of our bus routes to look at what would the base level of service look like. So if we were to have a system of priorities, then we can look at how we would layer those on. It's been a number of years since we've gone back and for an efficiency purpose looked at, what should these routes look like? What should schools start? Should we be influencing school bell times, for example, in order to make our routes more efficient and those kind of things? And again, it's in an area, I think, of expense that is something we need to have close scrutiny over in the coming months as we develop our budget. So that's one of the processes that we're into right now, is looking at starting with a blank map. So you know what GeoSchool is like, where we can put all the kids on the map. We can also put all those kids on the map that live more than 3 or 4 kilometers from their catchment school. And so using our routing software with EduLog, which is our transportation system software, we can get an idea of what some of that routing might look like.
Okay, question, comments? Yes.
Thank you. From our dialogue at Abbey Middle Transportation, a concern came up about, we're encouraging our students to get involved in the arts and music and so on and so forth, and yet a certain size instrument is not safe to carry on a bus. Number one, it doesn't have room. Number two, it could be a projectile when the bus driver hits the brakes. Can transportation look at maybe removing 1 or 2 seats in the back of the bus and put a cage back there for students so that they have an option of putting, like I'm even thinking of a 3/4 sized instrument in the between the feet of a small student, young student. That instrument could still become a projectile if the vehicle has to brake. And so I'm wondering, is that an option, or do we need every seat in every bus? And there's no opportunity for us, because I don't want to, that would create a safe environment for them to put the instruments in and carry them out of the bus without having to be outside the bus trying to get their instruments.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I've sent out the regulations. I emailed them out to you, the regulations around what can be transported on a school bus. I'm not certain that the regulations allow for removing seats for that purpose. So, yeah, in a lot of cases, we do need the seats on the bus, so.
Okay, Trustee Wilson.
I'm in support of Trustee Neufeld's recommendation, and if you're not sure that the recommendations read that, then I request that it come back with an absolute, and.
Certainly.
And while I appreciate that you're gonna provide an interpretation, if we could have not just the regulation, but also some external source saying that that's actually what it means. Thank you.
Okay.
Or another option, I talked to the music teacher that was there that day, and with a little bit of funding, you can actually get smaller instruments that function the same as the bigger instruments that they would take with them home rather than taking the big. So the big instrument actually stays in the band room, but an instrument with the same fingering, the child could take home. It's smaller, that they could practice at home, and they don't have to drag that big tuba, whatever, with them. So maybe there's an option that we can, if we can't do one, can we help them do the other, kind of? Because I would hate for us not to offer music and transportation to kids in our school, because I just would, anyways.
Trustee Latham.
What makes sense to me is that we find out how many students are impacted first before we, redesign buses and that kind of thing. I mean, I think maybe with some carpooling, creative thought here, maybe we can, I know it's an issue. I don't think it's just the one school that faces that issue. It would be any school that has a band program and any student that's playing a larger instrument. So is that possible for us to find out from the music teachers if there's instruments and students on buses that are in conflict?
I'll go back to something that we probably can find out some information. I don't know if we'd find it out if transportation would know, because they typically haven't allowed large instruments on buses. I don't know if the band teachers would be able to tell us some of that information or not. I think when we look at that whole issue of transporting and being obliging to that extent, transporting those instruments, I'll just make reference to something that Trustee Rye talked about, was how do we spend our money compared to all of these other comparator districts that we look at. And right now we spend a lot more money in transportation. So in a lot of these cases, it's not just that other districts aren't busing kids with band instruments. They're not busing kids in the same scenario. So even if we could take seats out, it still might not be practical for us to continue the level of service that we are currently providing. So it's just one of those things that we'll have to balance as we go through the budget process. But I will check with transportation on the idea of being able to remove seats and build a storage area. And see if that's something that's practical. Some of the buses have under carriage, like they have storage underneath the bus outside, but it's not
safe.
It's not also safe for us to stop the bus, have the driver get off the bus.
Right.
Help students load an instrument and that whole thing, so.
So I saw Trustee Wilson and then Trustee Anderson.
Yes, it's interesting because the board, at the request of the Secretary Treasurer, undertook a transportation review. My hope is that it is, looking for efficiencies, et cetera, without interrupting student life, because we need to do what's in the best interest of the student. And even in the brochure that we send home, it says studies show that the safest mode of transportation to school for students is on board a school bus. And if we really believe that, then we're not, it's not about eliminating, but finding out ways. I support Trustee Latham's request to find out how many students this does affect. Yep. I think it is, to the best of our ability, and email out to principals, to music teachers, a simple request to find out, because it will aid the board in this consultation. I think it is something that we should appropriately look at.
Trustee Anderson?
I just see one problem popping up if we have special places where this instrument is in the bus and the four-way flashers are going on. And all the cars on both sides have to stop and wait while they get this instrument and get it out. And there goes 5-7 minutes and all these people are waiting to pass the bus. I can see how irritating that would be for those people with that on there. That just came to mind when I was thinking of that.
So, one more, one of the questions that we're trying to answer as we go through this whole review, and, at some point, we're going to come together and make a decision where we go with it, but obviously we haven't looked at all the information completely yet, and this is one more area that we need to look at. Okay, unless there's anything more on that, King Traditional Elementary Air Quality Update.
Okay, the staff report is there along with the correspondence from the Ministry of Environment. I have just one additional thing to add that came in late. We've just received, like we do often from the city, a request for a development application from Terra West regarding their development application to the city of Abbotsford for a non-agricultural use permit to operate their
chicken
manure site adjacent to King. So that is going forward to the city, and we are in the process of drafting a response, which has to be in by, I think, next week. Get that back to them around what our concerns are regarding that development application. So that just came into us Monday, I think I got it, so.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you for that, Secretary Treasurer Velasek. Just a request that while they are you're forwarding those concerns, I was just wondering if it could be jointly signed by the superintendent and the board chair, because it is a very highly public matter, and I think, and it will form part of the public package, and I think from mayor and council perspective, it would have a little bit more influence.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good thought. Trustee Newfield.
Having read the letter from the Assistant Deputy Minister, it seems to me he's not taking this matter as seriously as we are. And I'm thinking of the health and well-being of our staff and students, and how long this has dragged on. I just feel like he'd be advocating the Minister of Agriculture to take steps instead of, his letter didn't seem to offer much to me as far as, they talk about the safety of students, they talk about this, they talk about that. When here's an opportunity for them to act on something, it's very simple. Put pressure on the Agriculture Minister to curb this. I'm thinking, what are the next steps? Are parents gonna have to stand in front of the gate with their kids to blockade these vehicles from moving in and out, to stop these things, to create some media frenzy in order for someone to act? Or someone gonna, I just feel like this has gone on long enough and they're not acting. I just find it appalling.
I don't think it's a unique situation. I think it's happened before across the province. I don't think that it's a totally unique situation. And so I don't know if that they've dealt with it in this fashion in previous examples, but I am concerned that they've operated this for 2 or 3 years without all the relevant permits and in contravention of city bylaw and in contravention of the municipal waste discharge, all these things that they don't have in place. My understanding is anyways, and they've been operating for this length of time, so.
What I deal with permits and inspections all the time. And for me to protect a tree on a site, I have to put tree protect, I have to waste more wood than actually is protecting that tree sometimes. But if I don't do that, they put a stop worker on my site. These guys have operated for how many years? With nothing. And I just feel like they have an opportunity here to act on good faith on behalf of students and the public and do something about it, and they haven't. And I just found this letter to be very political.
Yeah, I think they're operating within some gray areas, and so fair enough, but it's definitely taking some time to get a response.
And at least we're being asked to do something that might make a difference to it.
Present to the could we as a board present to city when they have the meeting?
I will check. I'm not sure what the what their entire process is, because I've just, in fact, I haven't even read the entire document yet, so, but I know
Here's
that
an
we've got
opportunity
till,
we should.
till, I think it's Wednesday, or Thursday, maybe next week to respond.
I'd be willing to go.
Okay.
I would support that.
Yeah, I'll have to find out if it's a written response or if it's.
I'm sure they'll be debating it in
No, it's
public.
forward comments, so it's a written response.
And I like Trustee Wilson's idea that it's
Yeah.
signed by the chair, or, you know, so.
But can you ask them the question that can the board present in a public?
On this topic.
Yeah.
I think it would carry more weight than a written.
Yeah, I'll see what their process is.
Yeah.
Cause I actually don't know what their next steps in this.
And we could
whole
fill the
process is.
auditorium with some parents and concerned people from the school and that community. I think that'd be just wonderful.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, we talked about this, has been dragging on for a year already with City Hall, so.
But we can always present to the council.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
If not at this thing,
Especially if we're unified.
maybe two meetings after.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter.
Trustee Wilson, yeah.
If it's a public consultation, any of us have the right to do that.
Yeah, but as a
So
board, it's a
If
bit
it's a public consultation, then I fully support actually that the board chair and the secretary and treasurer actually together, or perhaps Tanya, just present so that it's very clear in the communications about all the actual issues, and it's usually a few minutes for presentation, so.
And maybe if we get some press, it'll make a difference, but. Okay, yes,
no,
frustration,
sorry.
oh, yes.
You just mentioned press, and I just, it's, we can talk about this at a different time if you like, but I do think it's worthwhile because I understand the company is following us in our meetings and in the media. It would behoove us that perhaps we should consider even a media release about our stance on this.
I just wanted to ask about the meeting on March the 10th. So with,
I think that's part of their consultation process that they've described.
okay. So,
And my understanding is that they're meeting with the school as well, with the parents in the back or whatever, so.
oh, okay.
Do we know how the neighborhood around that is feeling, the people who live there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, but we've got an opportunity and let's
More to
hope.
come.
And more to come on it, but I really do like the idea of us presenting to the city council and that makes
It'll
some
be a
sense.
first.
Pardon me?
It'll be a first, but
It'll be a
the right
first,
one.
but you know what,
But
I
it'll be
think,
the right one to
I
go.
think we'll have a sympathetic ear,
I just don't know how much control they have over it,
Yeah, well-
except for the permit.
That's the other thing, okay. All right, before our last question period, it's trustee announcement time. Anything that, I know we do a lot of exciting things, maybe we're all, it's been, meetings have been too long and we, okay, trustee Anderson.
BCSTA. Trustee Latham and I attended in Maple Ridge, and what I was disappointed in is that not many from our board were out at the meeting, at the Fraser Valley meeting, and most of the other boards were there. And we feel that it's really important for us from the board, if you can possibly be there, to be there, not to slough it off. Anyway, our next meeting will probably be in October, so you have a lot of time to think about it in that area. But just to let you know that, and I think maybe you all got this, that elected with Shelley Carter from Mission is the president, and our own trustee Latham is vice president. We finally have a secretary, which is David Swanky from Chilliwack. And then our professional learning committee is Pascal Shaw from Maple Ridge. And when we come as in our strategy, maybe we can put aside a little bit of time to talk about some motions that's coming up for the BCSTA. that we should have, and that's funding for trades after 18 years old. And see whether we can come together and talk about it so that we, as Fraser Valley, can put together a motion. This is coming up. Funding for education, programming, and provincial correctional facilities. Because we have federal here, but a lot of them have provincial, and especially Maple Ridge area. And so that's another area to talk about, and then school site acquisitions, and there was a good topic that was given there as well. So those are the three things. Trustee Latham, was there anything else?
Yes, the branch would like us to start considering, in terms of branch meetings, what is it that would be purposeful and meaningful for each board. And if we could spend just a few minutes on that, I think it would be worthwhile. The other ask is about professional development, whether sometimes it could be, I suppose, at most branch meetings that we do some professional development, and I'm certainly not opposed to that. So we have to report back in April because we will meet at the AGM in Vancouver. And so if we can find 20 minutes somewhere just to sort of talk about branch and how to make it more meaningful. I think that has been part of our discussion in the past, and certainly the BCSDA has their eyes on the branches now. I think they're repurposing and reconsidering, what it is that branches can do and should do for local boards. So I will stay involved as long as there's something that connects us and is meaningful. And so I think that's a discussion that we could have. Many of you have been trustees for a number of years, so your history with branch is longer than mine. But I do see, the wheel turning a little bit in terms of, really considering what is the work that we can do at branch that will help us as boards, but help us provincially as well. Not all issues that boards have are the same, but there are some that are. It's making sure that it's one voice, I guess, in the province at times, that's speaking to the ministry.
And I've written that down as a topic, so I'm kind of compiling topics for trustees informal or times in which we have where we can talk about this. So most certainly, I think that's an important one,
Just one comment for Trustee Anderson and what he brought up, and then I'd like to just share a little bit about BCPC on the, I don't know if you know, our AVS is reaching into the prisons with our virtual school. And they have actually a whole wonderful package of helping inmates to graduation. And it's fantastic. In fact, I've actually mentioned it to this board. It'd be wonderful for us to supply some sort of a diploma for them, recognizing what they've done. I think it'd be a real shot in the arm for them, especially if they take the initiative while they're in prison to upgrade their education or even to graduate from high school. And I think we should recognize that in our community, even though they may have come from other provinces or are spending time in our prisons. AVS is doing a wonderful job of reaching into the prisons and through our, they pick up a package all the time with homework and whatever else not. It's a great program. So I think that's something you can mention to them. And I don't know how much Hutchinson's going to be there still. Is he gone?
No, not yet.
But close.
Well,
yeah, he is. But anyways, so BCPC January 31st, they're our bargaining agent, but we had representatives from all across the province come and gather together, and we had a wonderful AGM. I thought for me, the biggest take home was Vaughn Palmer, just the history of some of the things that have gone on politically in Victoria in education, and how he unwrapped all the last 20, 30 years, 40 years of what has gone on with the different parties being involved in Victoria, and how education and some of the issues regarding education. I thought it was very informative, very story-like, and he had me riveted for, 45 minutes? I thought his insight was phenomenal, and storytelling ability. I can't wait for him to write a book or two about politics in Victoria, because having been there for as long as, I think, 30 years? Yeah, that's a long time. I don't know, I'd check out a long time before that, hanging around Victoria, but he's got some wonderful stories and insights into everything. And so I thought that was a great take home of just the longevity of history of politics regarding education in Victoria. And he's seen it all, and the stories he told was wonderful. So it gave me a lot of aha moments, because you heard about things and you didn't know why, and he gave us some of the background to it, and then it made you understand why things happened the way they did. And it's very informative, so.
Okay. Anything else? Not hearing anything else, and this brings us to our second question period. And again, if you have a question, please step up, state your name, and as long as it's related to our agenda, then happy to answer it or refer it to senior management.
Hi. My name is Winsome. I was just wondering, like, with regard to the budget, like, has there, and just talk about the IB program, like, is there any plans, capital projects, to make sure that there is capacity for this grade 9, 10, like, preparation program for the IB program? Like, is that talked about at all, about increasing capacity, or making sure that there's equal opportunity for students in the district to prepare themselves at the grade 9, 10 level?
I'll refer that to the superintendent.
Well, what I'd say is, from a budget standpoint, it's certainly, the board has a long-term facilities plan, and trying to manage the enrollment of 20,000 kids across 46 schools is no easy task that they take very seriously. So for sure, trying to manage that is a part of the consideration, and that's something that the board will be looking at in the weeks and months ahead. But I can't specifically speak to this particular program, just to say that that's a requirement that the ministry has for all boards, is to have a long-term facilities plan to make sure that you have accessibility and that we have right-size our schools for programs and student enrollment.
Nothing specific.
Okay. No, not at this point, okay.
Not at this
I
point.
have a related question, probably because we're married. She's an engineer, I'm an engineer, she's an MBA, she went through the IB program, so we're all vested, we have 6 kids, so my question was gonna be just, is the board open to the concept if it was given a plan by Abby Senior, for example, for a middle years program for grades 9 and 10?
Absolutely, we're open to discussion around it.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that
Yes.
that discussion could still happen.
That absolutely can happen, yes.
Great.
Yes.
We'll remain hopeful then.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your hard work, everybody,
All
too.
right, thank you.
Thanks for staying to the
All right.
end.
Yeah.
With that, I think we'll call our
I got nothing this time.
meeting.
What?
I got nothing this
What?
time. Everything was excellent. Thank you.
All right, well, then in that case, given that recommendation, we're gonna call our meeting adjourned.
Start the car.
Yes.
Start the car, yeah.
Thank you for coming, thank you for going.